and welcome to episode 94 of the MJCast, Harrison Funk Special. I'm Jamon Bull. I'm here with my co-host Q and also guest host Charlie Thomson. Q won't be on this episode today, but we thought we'd kick things off with a little dedication to friend of the show, King Jordan. Jordan King passed away recently, unexpectedly and tragically, due to a condition that he'd had for quite some time. It's a real loss to the MJ community, I feel. It's such a tragic moment to be going through.
It is absolutely a loss to the MJ community. Through King Jordan's radio show, he interviewed a lot of people that were really important, especially around the trial and getting information out about the trial. Tom Mesereau was on his show a number of times, and the information shared through those episodes, and with fans able to phone in, as these were live recordings, fans were also able to ask Tom Mesereau and other guests questions directly.
Charlie, it's my understanding you were on Jordan's show at one point.
Yeah, I can't remember when exactly, but it was a couple of years ago now. It was an interesting experience because he, as you say, he took calls from fans while you were live on the air. But then what he didn't do was hang up afterwards. So by the end of the show, we had about 15 people on the line. One of them was in a coach terminal. So about every 30 seconds, we had a coach terminal announcement coming down somebody's phone line. And it was all a bit chaotic, but it was an interesting experience for sure.
He was really, really brave doing live recordings. It's something we've never attempted to do because of things like that. The scope of a live recording is absolutely terrifying, and he did it all the time.
Yeah, and the great thing is, all of King Jordan's shows are archived online, so you have, going back years now, this incredible record of interviews with people who were so closely involved with Michael's trial. Particularly Tom Mesereau, who appeared on the show again and again. The first person I spoke to after I found out that King Jordan had passed away was Tom Mesereau, and he was very shocked and upset. Particularly, you know, when you take into account how young he was only 36, which is just absolutely shocking.
Yeah, it is devastating. The loss is being felt all around the community right now. And a special shout out to Yolanda Vandergrift for keeping us updated on your Facebook page around the developments with Jordan King. We thought we'd just dedicate this show to Jordan. It's a show that Charlie and I recorded a while back in 2018 with Harrison Funk, Michael Jackson's official personal photographer. And Harrison goes into detail around a lot of things, including some of the darker sides to Michael's inner circle.
And Angela Lansbury.
Yes, well, that's something you were really happy about, I remember.
I think also it might be worth mentioning that these style of interviews that King Jordan did, they were an inspiration for us, especially as we first started out early on.
Absolutely.
He was doing very deep and special interviews way before we were, and we just wanted to tip our hat to his legacy, I guess, in this field.
Absolutely, a total inspiration, and he'll continue to be an inspiration as we interview people that were close to Michael Jackson. And hopefully Jordan would have enjoyed this. I know he would have enjoyed this interview we're about to play you. It's dedicated to him, and from all of us at the MJCast, Jordan, thank you for everything you did for the Michael Jackson community. The following is a presentation from the MJCast, the internet's premier podcast on all things Michael Jackson.
You're listening to the MJCast, by MJ fans, for MJ fans.
The idea is to innovate, or else why am I doing it?
When I create my music, I feel like an instrument of nature.
You let it create itself, really. I know I do. And I love to entertain. That's one of my favorite things. I love my fans. Just simply Michael Jackson.
Welcome to the MJCast, your source of news and discussion on the King of Pop. Today we're lucky enough to be speaking with award-winning photographer Harrison Funk.
Harrison has been shooting entertainment, fashion, and advertising for decades. Although he's worked for Rolling Stone, Spin, Newsweek, Life, and Time since the 80s, Harrison is probably most well known to us as Michael Jackson's personal photographer. Harrison has worked on countless Michael projects, including his feature-length film Moonwalker.
In addition to the King of Pop, Harrison has also photographed Janet Jackson, the Rolling Stones, U2, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Barack Obama, Nelson Mandela, and many, many other notable people. Harrison, welcome back to the MJCast.
Thank you guys for having me. I love being on this show.
That's great. The previous show that you were on, I think you did it with Charlie, the one on the World Music Awards. It's been pretty much one of the episodes we put out that's received the most great feedback, So thank you for your contributions on that show.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That was a difficult moment because I had to remember things that were, years ago and also moved very quickly that night or through that, the 4 days surrounding it. And Charlie was a wonderful, wonderful interviewer. I really appreciate you made it very easy, and I'm glad to hear that you've gotten good responses from it. I have as well. I've heard from fans, around the world saying, thanking me for being on and talking about it. And yeah, definitely for rebuking those people in the media that want to insist that Michael was booed instead of cheered, which I will stand up for the rest of eternity.
The story you told about sort of rushing around the stage trying to capture that performance, and I think you talked about falling over or something at one point. I've been going back and watching the video footage, like really squinting to see if I could see you somewhere in the crowd.
I have seen myself on video, and I've had a few fans tell me that they've pointed where I've been, and I was moving very quickly. What actually happened was that there was a television crew, 2 cameras in the pit. There were a couple of other photographers at the end of the pit, and I had to squeeze around them. And that area was very narrow. As I started from stage left, when Michael came out and tried to follow him, Michael was making faces at me, as he often would. And I just got locked into the moment. And it was funny because at one point, Michael and I had locked eyes, and he was walking forward on the stage, and he had that choir behind him, which my understanding was, didn't they put that together like the day before from some Boys and Girls Club?
Well, yeah, it definitely wasn't a choir. It was just a bunch of kids from a youth club or something.
Yeah. And, Michael I don't think had a clue exactly how it was going to go down because there'd been no rehearsal. He wouldn't come to sound check the night before. So there's this girl who's a cable puller for the TV camera person, and she got tired of having to sort of go around me. She pulls her cable up between my legs and trips me, as if to say, get out of my way. And I decided at that point I would go to the other side of the stage, to stage left and shoot there because, and it was a good thing I did because that's when I got the flag shot.
Yeah.
It was a smart move to go to the other side of the stage. And I actually, if I had it all to do over again, if Michael had rehearsed, I would have had cue points knowing where to go, but there were no cue points. I mean, let's be honest, on Victory and on Bad, I knew the show so well, and it was so perfectly choreographed. I mean, there was room for improv. Michael did improv kind of a little bit every show, but he was very precise in his movements. So I could tell you on every song where he would be, and I could tell you what I would be doing for that song. And I would sometimes map it out the morning of, kind of in my own mind. Sometimes I make notes, like the shot. I hope you don't mind me just talking freeform about some of this stuff. I just remembering it. But, the shot that I considered to be my sort of centerpiece, my go-to shot, which is the moonwalking image, which I have titled Motion. You guys are both familiar with that image, I'm assuming. You know
I
which one I'm
think
talking
so.
about.
I think I know the one. I'm actually going to Google, as you're talking today, I'm going to be Google imaging like crazy.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure I know the one you mean.
It's the one that's been on the cover of Life magazine
Yeah.
3 times.
Yeah.
And it was centerpiece. They extended the black on either side of Michael, and it was a center section for Time magazine when Michael passed away.
Yeah, I know the one.
Yeah, that came about because Michael and I had discussed, for 2 or 3 days, what would be an image like, that would something that would define a truly defining image of Michael. And, the idea, and I know how we're going to execute it. It's going to take some doing, and I had to have a couple people help me execute it. We relit that part of the show in order to make that happen. And actually, that frame is either I think it's either the 2nd or 5th frame in the sequence the first time I shot it. And it just worked. And I went to the lab the next day, processed the film, called back to the hotel, didn't get Michael on the phone, ran up to his room and knocked on the door. And Bill Bray looked at me like, "What is so urgent?" And I said, "Michael, come look at this. It's magic." And that was Michael's favorite word. Michael loved every show he would say to me, "Harrison, did we make magic?" My apologies for my bad Michael impersonation. I think that's probably better than Navi can do it. And I said, "Michael, we have created absolute magic. Look at this." And he went, "Wow." And he looked at me and I looked at him, and he looked at me and I looked at him. And then he says, "What are we going to do with it?" I said, "It's your trademark piece. We'll figure that out." And it didn't get used until the 2nd incarnation, I think, of the Dangerous Tour program. And then it sat. And he never asked to use it, never used any of the outtakes, nothing happened. And he left it in my care. He said, this is your masterpiece. And when he passed away, we released it kind of for the first time, and it got wide acclaim. The fans went crazy over it. And, I've exhibited it. I exhibited it before he passed away. Obviously, it was one of the bigger prints at Proud. You guys, Jamon, you weren't in London for the Proud show.
No.
But
no.
I think, Charlie, did you go?
No, I didn't know anything about it, to be honest. Was that Proud in Camden?
Yes, it was. No, it was Proud no, it was actually Proud in Charing Cross.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they've got a few locations. I think they've just closed down their Camden gallery.
I've heard that. I haven't talked to Alex in years, but Alex Proud is the owner. But this was at their. They had a very. I think the Camden gallery was kind of underground a little bit, where the Charing Cross gallery was very, in your face as you came out of the side entrance of Charing Cross Station. The gallery was right there, and I believe it's still open. I'm pretty sure it's still open. I think I got a notice of some show that's there now. We had 2,000 people on the street the night of the opening of that show. But that was Michael, obviously this was 2006. And when Michael saw it in the gallery, he was just ecstatic.
Well, Michael came to the exhibition.
Privately and quietly. I had heard he wanted to come to the opening. I was told we couldn't provide security for him. It was just too wild. So my understanding was that he had wanted to come to the opening. I have no idea if he actually drove up or not. He was, at the time, I think he was living at Mark Lester's. if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure he was staying with Mark at that time. And so one Saturday, I get a call that there's a strange guy hovering around the gallery from the gallery manager. I said, "Oh, okay, that's probably Michael." She described his disguise. It was the New York Yankees cap and buck teeth.
I love that one.
Wasn't that great? That was the one he was wearing that in Barcelona on the Bad Tour or something similar to that. And he was in a bookstore, and I walked up the street, not even realizing he was in the bookstore. I just went to go find magazines that had pictures of Michael on the cover and, see which ones were mine. And I'm staring at the books, and I realize that now there's a crowd of people outside. And I look over, there's Michael in disguise. And I whispered, "Hello." He said, "You realize that you dragged all the paparazzi with you. When they saw you making a move, they realized you were probably coming to meet me, and you had no idea I was here."
We're talking about, Michael Jackson coming to your exhibition and 2,000 people in the street and stuff like that, which is like incredible. But
not at the same time, Trump. 2,000 people
but,
at the opening.
This is like big stuff you're talking about, like the King of Pop and crowds queuing to get into your exhibitions and stuff. But we wanted to wind it back and understand really where it all started. So could you tell us a little bit about your early life and how you became interested in and then moved into photography?
I don't know if I ever told you the story. I've told it loads of times. I was 14, and I don't know if you guys grew up with a cabinet that your parents kept you away from. That's the drawer you're not allowed to open. You're not allowed to go in that. And mine did. And inside that drawer was my dad's camera. And of course, being a precocious kid, I said, "Oh, well, hey, it's Dad's camera. I'm going to see how it works." My dad was an avid hobbyist. He loved to take pictures. And my dad was an attorney and a judge, and he was very jovial but somewhat conservative man. So maybe I was actually 13. I think I was actually 13 when I did this. Yeah, I got the camera. There was some film. I took it out of the drawer, and I put a roll of film in and took some pictures of just like anything. And I then went to this arts program at the Y for the summer. And there was another guy there that had a camera, and I brought my camera and started taking pictures of people. And I got, slowly but surely, I got really bit by this photo bug. Actually, I think besides taking pictures of the other kids in the program, I took some pictures at a performance. As I said, it was an arts program, so there was dance and music and short plays. And I just brought my camera to one of those performances and started taking pictures. And I realized that I was so taken by the ability to capture action. I grew up reading magazines that don't even exist anymore. Music magazines like Rock and Soul and Circus and Hit Parader and, that lot. All I wanted to do was shoot concerts. But being, a high school student, I got to shoot lots of sports, lots of football, American football, proper football, soccer, as Yanks call it, and basketball. And really, I loved capturing the peak of the action. I loved capturing those moments on people's faces, the thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, that sort of thing. And then I discovered that having a camera was a tremendous icebreaker. So I could walk up to people that I would not normally chat to with my camera, get their permission to shoot. And girls loved it because, hey, take my picture, make me look beautiful. And when I showed, I made one look beautiful, they all wanted me to take their pictures. So it was a tremendous icebreaker. And it was lots of fun.
I just wanted to ask, just to interject quickly, and sorry, you can continue in a minute, but I just want to know whereabouts in the United States you grew up.
New York.
New York City. Okay.
Yeah, and every once in a while the accent comes through. So,
yeah.
You know, if you want me to sound like I'm from New York, hey, forget about it. I talk like I'm from Brooklyn. You know, that's where I was born. But New York. And New York is an ultra cool place. I think the only two other places on Earth that I consider as cool as New York are London and probably Tokyo. Although Barcelona and probably, I mean, there are so many cool cities, but New York has its own thing, and I can compare it. Charlie, have you been to New York?
Yes, yeah, I have. Okay. Only once.
Do you find the similarity to London?
Yeah, certainly in the way that everything is fairly close to everything else, you know, like London. Just things are walkable, whereas if you go to Los Angeles, it's just like ridiculous. It's like an hour to get from one thing to the next. And everything is much bigger in New York. Makes London look like Toy Town.
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, and I think there's a certain vibe, a certain essence that New York holds different than any other city on earth. And one of the things I used to love to do, and I started doing this as an early teen, was street shooting. I would go out, walk through the streets of New York, and just photograph people. Today, street shooting has a whole different meaning, unfortunately. But, you know, we didn't have that sort of crazy violence in the States back then. And New York was exempt from a lot of the problems that the rest of the country faced. I mean, New York had its own problems. I can't say we were devoid of racism, devoid of anger, devoid of protest. We weren't. You know, New York had the same problems as everywhere else. It wasn't the Deep South. It wasn't the, you know, you didn't see, at least I didn't remember seeing the hippie movement the way friends of mine who grew up in LA or in San Francisco saw it. But interestingly enough, I was really inspired photographically and inspired in my career as a photojournalist, especially one shooting music, entertainment. I was very inspired by the San Francisco, the hippie movement, and the photographs that came out by people like Jim Marshall and, you know, who lived in San Francisco, photographed the Grateful Dead in Haight-Ashbury. That was all a huge influence to me. And I remember seeing these pictures as a kid. I remember seeing a picture of Janis Joplin backstage. I guess it was just after she passed away. And I thought, wow, what an amazing photograph, because it captured somebody off stage behind the scenes as they really were. I think it was a Jim Marshall picture. I thought Jim was, you know, I think Jim was an amazing photographer. But I remember, you know, all of this kind of led to my wanting to shoot music, whether it was live. Obviously, I had to have a backstage pass. I had to be able to get access. And access is everything. You know, if you don't have access, you can't capture the moment. You can't document the reality. So you have to have access. And half the time when you work for an artist like Michael, if you get that access, those pictures never see the light of day. They become, you know, and I hope, because I don't have most of what I've shot for Michael, it went to his archives. You know, I have no idea. I mean, I was entrusted with over 200 pictures that I chose and that, you know, I discussed with Michael. And those are the ones that we see released, you know, that I've had now to release. But there's hundreds of thousands of others taken by me and other photographers that are in a vast archive. You know, things behind the scenes that have never seen the light of day. There's a picture that I love. It was published a couple times in the 80s of Michael. We went to Detroit to visit. He was doing a show at. We went to a dinner hosted by Berry Gordy at his home, which was called Boston House. I think it's on Boston Road. Michael was being given a tour of the place and remembering, coming there as a kid, and he walks into the pool. There's a big indoor swimming pool, and there's a piano in the indoor swimming pool area. And Michael goes over to the piano, and Barry sits down at the piano. Michael grabs his hat, and I'm shooting him with Barry playing the piano and dancing the way he danced when he auditioned for him. And there's video footage of this, and there are stills of this, and I don't have them. They exist, and I hope that one day they'll actually see the light of day.
How confident are you that anybody actually has custody of those pictures? Because it seems like the so-called archive was in disarray when the estate inherited it, because they apparently can't find the bad tour celluloid footage and various other things seem to be missing.
I have had numerous discussions with the family about that. I do believe that the archive of still images exists. I don't know in what form. I don't really, this is not my province at the moment. I wonder if something will change at some point in the future with the way the estate runs things. I'm hoping that one day there will be a bad book, a very good bad book. And, I think that it is definitely time to do that. I mean, people ask me all the time if I'm going to do a book. I'm not going to ever do just a Michael book unless I do it in conjunction with his kids or his family.
And just before we delve into some of these Michael questions we've got, you talked to us about your early career, but can you talk to us about how your career really began? What was the first big break for Harrison Funk?
I think that life is a series of breaks. Truth be told, it's hard to put a finger on which thing was my big break. If I leave something out, then I think back, oh, why didn't I mention that? As I said, I shot a lot of sports. I started working with the Associated Press and the New York Times and Gannett paper, the Gannett paper chain, when I was in high school. That led to me meeting a whole bunch of people that were intimately involved with Warner Communications, and I started shooting the Cosmos, which was the soccer team, football team that Pelé played for. And I had access through these people to shoot Genesis, Peter Gabriel, the Stones, Leif Garrett, Peter Frampton, and all of that sort of snowballed into, working with various music artists. Hard to say what my real first big break was. I guess 1981, I did the cover for Simon and Garfunkel's Concert in Central Park reunion show. And I actually shared the cover with another photographer, but we were hired independently and separately to shoot the show by Warner Brothers. And another break, I have to give credit to a wonderful publicist in New York in the early 80s named Howard Bloom, who saw my early portfolio and really thought that I could be trusted to work with his artists. And so he put me on tour with REO Speedwagon, and touring wasn't new to me. I'd already been out there, doing it. I also guess I can attribute some of it to getting to shoot Billy Joel when I was in college, because I got to meet his manager, who was also, I guess, his tour manager at the time, who hired me to do a few of his shows. And I was only 18, 19. I wish I could say there was one gigantic big break, and there really wasn't. I think that the culmination of all these little breaks was in being hired to shoot the Victory Tour. Mm. And that to me is, as I said, it's a series of little breaks, one after another that snowball into building a career. And I think that's probably, I look back, guys, I'm telling you, honestly, I look back on my life and I think, I feel like I'm still 25. And I feel like I can, if somebody calls me tomorrow to, go out and shoot a show, I'm going to still run around the stage the way I did when I was 25. Maybe a little slower because I'm a little overweight now, more so than I was back when I was 25. But, I'm working on that. I'm working very hard on that right now. But no, I mean, I felt like I was on tour with Janet a few years ago, and I felt like, it was very similar to being on tour with Michael. Protocols were similar. The family is the same. Getting those shots and having access is all the same. It's all the same, and that's what I push for. Whenever an artist asks me to work with them, I say, look, the thing I need is your trust. Give me access. I won't release pictures to the press that will embarrass you. I'm not going to do anything that's going to embarrass you. Matter of fact, that's part of my ethos is I don't have any interest in sensationalism or in embarrassing my clients. And I really, dislike the sensational media. So, to me, this is possibly the most important thing that a photographer who does what I do can give to their artist to their client is, to be sure to give them the best pictures in the best light, make them look the best, and also capture the other side of that, but not release it and embarrass them ever. Some artists will create scandal purposely to get notoriety. Those are true stories that people do that.
Who? Give us names.
Not on your life. Not on my life. Just suffice it to say that, look, even our president, the guy that's in the White House that calls himself our president, he's a reality show host. This is not presidential material, I've seen presidents. I've photographed almost every president since Carter, and presidents don't act the way this guy acts. He's a huckster. He's a showman. This is, and I'm putting my neck on the line by saying it, but this is. I sometimes wonder if he's not creating a reality show called "Welcome to the White House" or something like that. I just don't. I look at this and I say, he creates and he is aware of every gaffe, every foolhardy mistake that he makes, and don't let anybody fool you in saying that he's not aware of it. He is very calculating. I've known artists that are like that. There is I don't want to name names because I don't want to have anybody come back and sue me for slander. But, there are definitely artists that create that kind of drama to get in the papers.
Well, let me ask you this, Harrison. So Michael used to be friends with Trump back in the day. What do you think he would make of what's going on right now?
That's that's really an interesting statement. Was he friends with Trump? I don't think
Trump thinks so.
Well, yeah, but Trump thinks that everybody loves him and everybody's out to kiss his rear end and bloody bushy his orange pate. I wouldn't say that Michael was truly friends with Trump. I'd have a hard time believing that. But then again, Trump puts himself in those situations. First time I met Donald Trump was photographing a made-for-TV miniseries called I'll Take Manhattan, based on the Judith Krantz book. I was doing specials for the ad agency, and I had to photograph Trump in Trump Tower. And one of his scenes was he was having lunch with Valerie Bertinelli, who was one of the stars. Valerie Bertinelli was married to Eddie Van Halen. And I knew Val, pretty well. And Trump was personable. I don't know that he did any grabbing, as he's so famous for. But you could tell that he was even, this was 80, I want to say 5 or 6. And he was, you can do your fact checking online while I'm talking, but 85 or 86. But he was, he orchestrated all of the photos to be about him. And he really he was not even a big player in the movie. He's always enjoyed the limelight. Was he really friends with Michael? I have no idea. I never interacted with the two of them on a personal level. Any more than Michael, when he was staying at the Helmsley Palace, was friends with Leona Helmsley. Leona Helmsley will probably tell you that they were. And of course, that's where, oh God, forgive me, the concierge, the father of the Cassio.
Oh, Cassio.
Yeah. Dominic.
Michael was friends with them, was friends with the Cassios. But I wouldn't say he was friends with Leona Helmsley, and I have no idea. Would Michael have supported Trump? I don't know. But I'm going to guess that he'd have a hard time supporting Trump, because Michael was not about the things, Michael was about preserving the earth. He was ecologically minded. He was about social justice. He was about helping people. And, look at Trump's record.
So jumping back, who was it that hired you onto the Victory Tour? And can you remember your first face-to-face meeting with Michael and your first impressions?
Well, my first face-to-face meeting with Michael on the Victory Tour was not my first face-to-face meeting with Michael, but I was hired to do the Victory Tour by the Jacksons, and I was put in that position initially by Howard Bloom, who was a publicist for the Jacksons family at the time. Although that, there are people that might change his title a bit. The Jacksons had a bunch of people working on publicity. But I was brought to L.A. by, I guess, Howard made the initial introduction to bring me to L.A., although at Tavern on the Green, I remember Jermaine making a comment to me about the tour. My first impression, Tavern on Green, by the way, was where the press conference was in November of '83, announcing the tour. That was Don King's big press conference. And it was kind of a whirlwind. I mean, I flew out to LA in March of '84, just before rehearsals started, and met up with the Jacksons, sort of their personal assistant, tour manager, Nelson Hayes. He calls me in the morning after I get there, and he says, "Oh, are you ready to start working?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Good. Be at Leo Carrillo Beach in an hour." And I'm in Hollywood, and accessing Leo Carrillo Beach, which is in Malibu, in an hour was not necessarily the easiest task. I had spoken to him about this shoot that we were doing, which was a shoot with all the cars, the 4 Ferraris and the Lamborghini and the Camaro, which was a Knight Rider car. And we'd spoken about that a day before or something. And I didn't realize it was going to happen that morning. And I not only got there, but I had to really hit the ground running. I had to kind of take over a big portion of that shoot and do not only behind the scenes, but also ended up taking over the main shoot. And it was quite an experience. And Michael was like, here, take some pictures of me in my jockey outfit on, in front of this Lamborghini. And he was the only one that wasn't dressed like a race car driver. He was dressed like a jockey, which I found to be absolutely amazing. If you're going to do something, do it different, do it uniquely, make a statement. Yeah, Michael and I chatted and I said, whatever you're doing, I'm at your disposal. Whatever you need, I'm at your disposal. It worked into a pretty great relationship where I got a lot of access, not only to him, but to everybody in the family.
So what was it like working with the Jacksons on the tour like that? I mean, we've heard from so many people that they were incredibly hands-on. Was it a situation where Michael was letting somebody direct the tour and he was involving himself, or was he the man in charge? What was it like working with these guys?
I think that it was not just Michael, but it was, you had three very strong personalities on stage. Michael, of course, being the strongest of the three, but you had Michael, Jermaine, and Jackie. And there were days during rehearsal. I remember them all going, into a room and huddling, discussing changes that needed to be made or additions or and hands-on is not the word. These guys were or are the consummate pros. I mean, I've never met artists that know every aspect of what they do in performing live. These guys were choreographing, they were dancing, they were singing, they were overseeing the lighting plot and grid. They were hearing playback so that they could hear what the sound would sound like and get an idea of what the sound would sound like in a setting. Don't forget they were playing, venues of 50 to 100,000 people. This was the biggest tour that ever hit the business up to that point, and the most lucrative. And these guys were totally hands-on. It was their tour, and they, this was, I don't think anybody going into it really thought this was a swan song for the Jacksons. I think that people going, that most people, there was speculation that, maybe Michael would go off on his own. Probably he would. But I don't think anybody expected that he would never perform with his brothers again after that. And least of all his brothers. I think, I think they thought that, okay, Michael's going to have a solo career. This is my speculation. And, they'll keep performing. Something else will happen. And I think everybody's very proud of Michael. I think that was the key, is everybody's very proud of his ability. I don't think, I'm not going to stick my neck out and say that there was a lot of jealousy. I don't think there was. I think there was the desire to keep the Jacksons a group and viable. But Victory wasn't their best ever album. There were some good songs. Don't forget the Torture video, which had the
dummy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was on set and I cringed when I saw that. And I Jermaine was off he was prepping Do What You Do. And I flew out from New York to LA to shoot Do What You Do. And I told him about the dummy. And he just shook his head and he said, "Does Michael know?" And I said, "I have no idea if Michael knows." And when I saw Michael, Michael said, "So you were on the set of Torture?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh my goodness." And he asked me, a whole bunch of questions about it. I was embarrassed. I mean, that dummy was embarrassing. It was ridiculous. And I think that, and I still to this day believe that was there not just because they thought they could get away with a representation of Michael, but I think they were poking fun at him in a way for not being there, not being part of the video. I still to this day don't know all of the true reasons why he didn't want to be part of that album in a big way. I think that one of the best songs on that album, by the way, is State of Shock.
Yeah.
Which got the least airplay and the least notoriety of that whole album. And frankly, I thought that Body, which was also a really good song, even though Michael wasn't part of it, I think that the video for Body was actually pretty incredible. And there was no pretense at having Michael in it. It was just, it was really just Marlon, Jackie, Randy, and Tito. I think Jermaine wasn't even in it. No, it was just the four of them. So I think that at the time, I think they realized that they would have to carry on without Michael. And I think it was difficult for them.
So what did Michael think of the dummy?
I think that you can imagine what Michael thought of the dummy. I'll leave that to your vivid imaginations, but and I would leave the words he used to describe it to your vivid imagination.
Just on Victory, before we get into some of these other tours, Michael, at that time, we've talked about how the album had a little bit less Michael than before. We've talked about how Michael, at that point, possibly felt like he'd outgrown the group. Did any of this, do you think, have... there's media reports, many out there, about there being tension between the brothers around this tour, behind the scenes. Did you see any of that? Or did you see a united group?
Again, it's not a short answer. There was tension, but I don't think the tension was because of what you may think it is. There was tension because all of them, don't forget, Jermaine also at that point had a solo project that was doing very well. And he, I think that there was a bit of tension because the other brothers also tried to do solo projects around the time. Marlon did one, Jackie did one, I think Randy did one. If I'm not mistaken, the only one that didn't do a solo project at that time was Tito. And to be honest with you, the tension didn't come from just Michael's project. I don't think that his brothers were not proud of Michael for being what and who Michael was. I think that the brothers saw Thriller as an absolutely great endeavor. And the fact that Michael had done so well, the fact that he had captivated hearts moonwalking at Motown 25, the fact that because, and I think because of Michael, I will give Michael more credit probably than other people will. Although I don't think you could disagree with the fact that the Victory Tour was the biggest tour in the history of music up until that point. Because of Michael, people came out, there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of Jackson's fans. No question about it. Everybody wanted to hear the Motown medley sung by the Jacksons. Everybody there, nobody booed anybody off the stage. Nobody got impatient. Nobody got impatient that Jermaine did 3 songs of his own. Nobody got impatient that Michael did his solo songs with his brothers. You know, don't forget the Victory Tour had no other dancers. There was no, you know, the choreography was Michael and his brothers, as they had been doing it for years. They had musicians, background singers, whatever. But this was the Jacksons. The Jacksons were Michael's dancers. The Jacksons were, you know, and Michael didn't even feel confident in doing Thriller on that tour, as you may recall. Mm. So, you know, was there tension? I'm sure there was. I know that there was tension because, you know, also the people that were surrounding these guys created tension. You know, they had so let's look at this. The Jacksons had a manager who managed 4 of them: Jackie, Tito, Randy, and Marlon. Jermaine had his own manager. Michael had his manager, Frank DeLeo. And everybody would have to agree through their managers. And believe me, they were so hands-on that they made their own decisions. They went into meetings. I saw one meeting where they threw the managers out of the meeting. And the peacekeeper was Tookie. Because Frank had a way of really, he was the voice of reason. They may not have always agreed with him because he was there protecting Michael's interests. But he showed a great deal of respect for the brothers. You know, this will cause tension. You have a group that has been one group with one manager for years, and all of a sudden you've got 3 separate entities with different managers. And even within the Jacksons, you know, I'm sure there was more than one person giving Jackie, Tito, Marlon, and Randy advice. On stage, look at the tapes. Do you see tension on stage? I see, you know, 5 and later, well, don't forget Jackie wasn't touring because, you know, he was injured.
He performed some shows with them, but
at
the whole
the very
middle
end
section of the tour, yeah, he didn't.
Yeah, from the beginning, he didn't even travel from the very beginning, and then, you know, he was laid up in the hospital in the very beginning. Michael, by the way, was devastated. I was at Havenhurst with Michael the day after Jackie was injured, and Michael was in tears. My brother's not going to be able to do this tour. What are we going to do? But Michael was the kind of person that believed that the show must go on, and he did it. But it broke his heart that Jackie couldn't do it.
This is Tito Jackson, and it's Tito time. And thanks for listening to the MJCast.
After Michael did split from the brothers, you carried on touring with him. So did you observe any changes in him, either as a person or as a performer, after he split off and went solo?
Have you ever had one of those moments where every bit of stress and pressure doesn't just fly off, but it alters? Michael, it was like the difference between Michael on stage without his brothers and with his brothers was, it was not like he had changed in any way himself. He was still the consummate pro. Matter of fact, he worked really hard in all cases. I've never seen a harder working artist in my life. Watching him at dance rehearsals, both with his brothers and on his own. I mean, he worked hours on his own, even in Victory, getting his steps right and working out choreography for all of them, and then making sure that they did it flawlessly. And to see him do this on his own, on Bad, was just amazing, because he made this was his tour. He had never worked alone. He had always been part of that family. Michael was very comfortable on his own. He was extremely comfortable on his own. He was extremely comfortable, doing his solo project. Didn't mean he didn't love his brothers, but I think he realized at that point that he had outgrown being part of a group, and it was time for him to do solo projects. And of course, as we all know, his solo projects turned into the biggest and brightest of the industry. I think he still holds the record for the most albums sold, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't he? For Thriller. Yeah.
You're talking about this situation with the 3 different managers, and that it got a bit complicated in that sense. When Michael split off and it was just him, did that actually change the way that you worked with him? Were you able to work with him in a different way than when you were working with the brothers as a group, and how so?
Sure. I reported directly to him and only to him. I mean, Frank, would run some interference, but nobody else on that tour ever, thought that they could, interface with me as to how to work. And it became much easier, because if there was ever any controversy at all, in terms of me doing my job, I went right to Michael, or I went right to Frank, and I said, look, this is what I'm butting up against. What do I do? And I always got, what do you want to do? How do you want to work it out? Not in so many words, but, that was, there was one situation, and I'm not going to elaborate, but there was one situation where I went to the two of them, and I said, this is what's going on. And Frank said, you're doing fine. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And Michael said to me in a separate conversation, I don't have a problem with the way you're handling this. Just let's make it work. But Michael cared about one thing insofar as what I was doing. My job was I had a very narrow perspective of what to do. Okay, my job was to document Michael's every move. My job was to provide a history, a historical cache of images that would tell the story of Michael Jackson on that tour. And that's what I did. At hospitals, visiting sick children, at shows, backstage, even riding on the train between Dusseldorf and, where do we go? Hanover and Dusseldorf. we had some of Hitler's carriages that the railway had loaned Michael. They were historically preserved carriages. All the swastikas were removed, I believe. But nonetheless, it was a weird kind of vibe. But I photographed Michael, sleeping on a couch in the train and eating. And I think I was telling somebody, Jamon, as a matter of fact, I was telling the story about, they asked me on Today Extra a couple days ago. They asked me about access. And I said, yeah, there are pictures of Michael eating blueberry pancakes in his hotel room, in his bathrobe. They'll probably never see the light of day if they even exist anymore. I'm sure they do. But, I wouldn't put them out there if I had them. Because, it's very personal. And that was my job. Those were the guidelines that I had to follow, was to photograph Michael, make him look good, which was sort of unwritten, unsaid, unwritten law. But you don't want to make your artist look bad. But capture him in reality, what he's doing, and show the history, show the truth. And that's the job of a photojournalist. So my job was actually very, the parameters of my job were narrow. And as long as I did that, he was happy. There was the other side of that, which was Michael and I spoke candidly, frequently. And that's something I won't talk about because that's between me and him. But, he often asked me questions and often asked for my input on things that I gave him very candid responses to. What I think is probably good, friendly advice. I don't mean to make light of that. I just mean, that's how I respected Michael.
So at what point would you say your relationship turned from a professional one to a friendly, personal one?
I think in the early part of Victory, there was a situation where that was cemented probably in a conversation that Michael and I had where I brought something to his attention that he was unaware of, and I was looking out for him. His mother and Janet were both, this was in Cleveland, Ohio. They were both in Cleveland for the shows and in his suite. And we had he had some harsh words for me, thinking that I was at fault with something. I wasn't. And I told him, I said, look, I don't want to, put blame on somebody else, but I'm going to tell you the truth. This is what happened. And you have a choice. You can either believe me and I'll stay, or not believe me and I'll go home. My point is that I'm going to tell you the truth, Mike. That's the way it is. And there were a couple other people on tours with Michael over the years who told him the truth. The one person I think who probably protected Michael, who stood up for Michael, who really knew and understood Michael best of all, was Bill Bray. Bill was just, a godsend to Michael's life and career. And it's too bad that he passed before, so much happened that I think Michael needed his guidance. Bill was almost
just for those not in the know, that was Michael's head of security, right?
Chief of staff and head of security. He started out, Bill Bray was chief of detectives for LAPD. I think he was the first African-American chief of detectives in LAPD. He was Michael's right-hand kind of surrogate dad. He was the tour dad. He looked after Michael. And I think that he and Joe were actually pretty good friends. There was a lot of respect there, at least. Bill looked out for Michael like a father would look out for a son. Bill ran all the security plans and, also made sure that Michael was always taken care of. Mm. And that extended to people that were on the A team, the people that were closest with Michael. There was an incident. There was a situation where we had to go in every city across the world that we toured. We had to go process film. Film for your listeners was the thing that preceded digital cameras. No one would dream of taking an iPhone picture of a concert back then. Nobody could conceive of what digital photography became. I mean, people were talking about, well, one day that's going to happen. But we used this celluloid composition of dyes and silver to preserve photography. That's what it was all about. That's what photography was. That's, the exposure of silver halide crystals. I don't want to get too deep into this, but, we used film. We would have to go to a lab in each city, if there was one, and the lab was usually recommended by the people at Epic Records or later Sony because they had relationships. And there was one lab. I would go in, take all the pictures with me. I would have a count of the rolls, and I would have to stay there while they processed the film. Couldn't just drop it off and pick it up later, And one of these labs said, no, we can't do it. And I said, well, but there's no way I can leave this here because we just, it's not that we don't trust you, but we can't trust you, not to duplicate frames, or there's sensitive pictures on there. And the guy says to me, well, take it somewhere else. So I called Bill and I said, what do I do? And he says, hang on a second. He makes a couple phone calls. Somebody calls the guy from the lab. I hear the guy from the lab talking loudly with somebody else on the other end of the phone. When I realized that he is now, we were in Europe. He was talking to somebody in the States. And I realized that the loud was probably from not being able to hear, because in those days, we didn't have Skype, we didn't have VPN, we had these crazy landline phones that ran by wires under the Atlantic Ocean, and then satellite. And so the guy gets off the phone, he comes out to the front, and he says, Mr. Funk, I'm sorry. Whatever you need, let me know. How many rolls do you have? I said, I think I have and I think it was 2 days worth of shows I was developing. So it was maybe 50 rolls of film. To process each roll takes an hour. It wasn't 50 hours. I mean, you gang process them. You do it all together. But the guy comes back out after he loads all the film in the machine, and he says to me, your boss has the most incredible ability to turn a situation around. And I said, oh, did you talk to Michael? He says, oh, no, I talked to Mr. Bray, who spoke to so-and-so, who spoke to so-and-so. And I said, well, thank you. And the pictures were processed, and I went back to the hotel, and Bill said, let's change the game plan. I'll call the people that are recommending the lab before you go, night before. They'll have the conversation that they had to have yesterday, and you'll never have this problem again. And I never had that problem again. Bill had his hands into everything in a very good way, everything that would affect Michael in any way. So did Frank DeLeo. I can't say that Michael's managers after Frank they were hands-on, but I don't think they were as astute managers as Tookie. I think Tookie was he may not have done the most for Michael, but he definitely handled Michael the best.
I think in those later tours, especially when you're looking at, if you listen to some of the testimony at the wrongful death trial with AEG, and you start thinking about what Michael was dealing with privately in some of those later tours, especially Dangerous, History, and then This Is It. It certainly sounds like Michael needed another Bill Bray with him in those later tours. I mean, some of the staff that Michael had working for him, it's come out in those testimonies that some of those staff were involved in trafficking drugs to Michael Jackson, knowing that he was addicted to opioids. His own staff. I'm not going to ask about Michael's drug use, but do you think there were people working for Michael? Did you see any people working for Michael that were actively working against his best wishes?
No, not at that stage, no. And certainly not in terms of drug use or, no, I never saw anybody that was really working against his best wishes, but I don't think that everybody that worked for Michael over the years worked for his best interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are people that were very self-serving, managing, assisting, being the secretary for. There are people that I think were very much out for themselves. That Michael surrounded himself with people. Look, Conrad Murray, the son of a gun, comes out and tweets about Joseph. I mean, what the hell? Conrad Murray's a convicted murderer. And he's still using Michael's name to propel himself into the limelight. Those are the kind of self-serving people I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It wasn't just him. Thank goodness Tomei keeps his mouth shut. I was at the memorial. I was shocked. I turned to the right, and there he is. And just standing there like he has something to do with anything. There are people. I'm not, if I wasn't on radio, there are people I would mention specifically. But, Michael had a few people, not all that many, but he had enough that made it difficult because they were out for themselves. Now, some of the ones that were out for themselves also found a way to be out for Michael. They did things that were beneficial for Michael. And that's just a fact of reality. People do that. People can be self-serving and also serve the people that they're working for. I don't think it's right, but it is how they do it sometimes. And I think that the worst of it is that Michael was very trusting. I think he always had one eye open, but I think he was very trusting, and he was willing to give a lot more benefit of the doubt to people than maybe he should have.
So Harrison, I understand you were shooting the Liberian Girl video. What are your memories from that shoot?
The day that we actually shot Michael was truly bizarre because he was, obviously not on set with all of the actors and that were featured in that video. And his scene was actually very easy, or so I thought. We captured it I don't remember how many takes we did. I think they got it on the second or third take, and he wanted to keep going and keep going. This is his scene where he's on a Chapman crane and he comes down and he says, "Okay, that's a wrap," and he giggles. And that was really his entire involvement but his entire presence in the video. And yet the photographs from that became so, for lack of a better word, so iconic and so telling of who Michael was as an actor. I think that certainly people that I spoke with, that saw the video afterwards and let's not forget that video wasn't even released here in the States for ages. Though it got out here. I mean, MTV played it quite a bit. We shot for half a day or a little more. Michael didn't interact with all of the stars that were in it, and yet the photos, of him became very recognizable and very iconic. And I think that Michael intended it to be that way. I mean, then of course on Dangerous, he went on to do Remember the Time, and I was on set a couple days, for that, and I came down one day just to visit, And I think Michael had a tremendous amount of fun doing that. I think that was, I think that he probably, I think Michael enjoyed being on camera. I think he, and I think just from what Michael said to me, I wasn't on set for it, but I think he had a tremendous amount of fun with Leave Me Alone, and with which was all green screen and in the studio, and I think he had a tremendous amount of fun with because I think Michael liked to get to be playful. Probably the best long form video that he did was probably Smooth Criminal, and that was a challenge. I think he found himself actually acting, making a movie. And I think that's something that he loved to do. I think he, his dream, of course, his goal and his dream was to make films. And I think it's very sad that he never really got the chance to shine as an actor.
You mentioned Leave Me Alone, which it kind of fits into another topic that we wanted to raise, because the other kind of defining feature of the Bad era, you've got the tour and the videos, and it was really like worldwide Michael mania. But what that did also was it ushered in the era of so-called like wacko jacko press coverage, which was just bananas at the time, which is the theme of the Leave Me Alone video. You obviously were in Michael's inner circle whilst all this media madness was going on around the outside. So what was your experience from within the camp looking out at all of this crazy press coverage, and what was Michael's response to that?
At first, I think he was really taken aback by the wacko jacko crap. And I think there's an interview, I don't remember whose interview it was, was it Barbara Walters, or was it
where he said, "Don't call me Jacko"?
Yeah, he says, "I'm not Jacko, I'm Jackson, Michael Jackson," or something like that. He was. I mean, look, Wacko Jacko was the son. Purely, I think Murdoch and his cronies would have done anything to figure a way to capitalize on Michael's fame and media attention. I think that they would have done anything at all to make sensational reports out of Michael. It is, it's pathetic. He hated that. I mean, I really, I hate to say it that quite so adamantly and blatantly, but he could not stand the Wacko Jacko stuff. It was very upsetting to him. And I mean, at the same time, I think, there were moments when he laughed at it, but he was doing that for self-preservation. I don't think there was a moment when Michael really thought that it was funny. If you were in London during the Bad tour, you can go back to the archives of The Sun, and I encourage that, where every single day, Wacko Jacko this, Wacko Jacko that. And unfortunately, I don't know even if his PR people could have done damage control to stop it. I think that there should have been more of that. And I fault the PR people on the Bad tour for not doing more. But again, how do you know that they didn't see this as a means to getting more front page press? And of course, it wasn't just The Sun. It was. I mean, probably the Mail and News of the World and then Wacko Jacko bled over into the U.S. and we didn't have it as much here.
The National Enquirer picked it up, I think.
Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah. The Enquirer picked it up, and I wasn't. I was with Michael at the time, so I don't remember what people were seeing here. People would comment to me about it. I had one person call me and say, "How was the tour with Wacko Jacko?" And I said, "Who?" I cringed with it, although I was thinking, these people are the wacko ones.
I remember when we were recording the World Music Awards episode, and I did like an hour-long interview with you, and of course I could only use parts of it in the hour-long special that I put together. But we had a whole discussion about what a conflict it created for you, because you consider yourself a journalist and you're very proud to consider yourself a journalist and you think it's a very noble profession. But at the same time, you would feel embarrassed and ashamed by what other journalists and what the media was doing.
And part of the problem is, Charlie, that I don't consider tabloid journalism. I don't think of tabloid writers as journalists. Now, here's an interesting point. The headline in The Guardian. If you had Tom Hobbs on right now, he would verify that I never said that Michael was gender fluid. What I said was that Michael saw gender, race, ageism, ethnicity the same way, right? You're not a thing, right? You're not. He wouldn't see somebody as being male or female first. See them as a person. And so the activity of, and I think that this is part of the problem. This all came about because of that one picture of Michael putting makeup on using not a powder puff, but a brush, powder brush. And I think that, we were talking about he had a feminine side. Well, we all have a feminine and a masculine side. You can be the most macho man in the world, and I guarantee you, unless you're a total dolt, that you have some kind of some feminine side to you. It doesn't mean you can't define sexuality by that. Does that make sense, the way I'm saying this?
It does, yes. Okay.
The media tried to paint a picture of Michael, and for years, like I had gay friends who would say, "Oh, Michael's gay." Really? You know this? Oh, yeah. I had a friend who saw him in a gay bar one night. Really? Michael in a bar? Gay or straight? Michael in a bar? You couldn't get Michael to go to a party on tour. He'd maybe show up and stand in the background for a second, look and wave and leave. Come on, let's be serious, people. The media tried to paint him as something. So when I said that, sure, Michael had a feminine side to him. I have a feminine side to me. Ask Lena. I think every man, and I think that women will tell you, they're in a relationship with a guy, they want that guy to have that whatever feminine softness or whatever, or quality as well. And I don't even think I'm expressing this well. But somebody took my words, and it wasn't Tom Hobbs, who I have respect for. And it was a headline writer. I attributed it to some, just out of school person that probably got a job writing headlines because and Charlie, you and I have both been writers and editors as well. Mm-hmm. You know how headlines are written, usually by a party that had nothing to do with the interview itself, takes it, reads it, writes a clever headline that fits the space.
Exactly. It's amazing that so much of it is actually dictated by the space. People don't realize the headline in a newspaper, like the primary thing that impacts it is, does it fit perfectly into the space?
Right. So for all the fans, and there weren't many, I got a few remarks from fans about the headline, which I didn't write. I said, read the body of the feature. And hopefully, you'll understand exactly what I meant. Bar none, everybody wrote back to me and said, absolutely, we read the piece, we understand.
Yeah, when I read it for the first time, like you say, the body of the work was phenomenal. The headline about the gender fluidity, I was like, that doesn't sound really like something Harrison would say. That explains a lot. Now that you've said that, it seems as like they've just tried to get that story and pin it on whatever topic's popular at the moment, rather than actually expounding on what you were saying.
Oh, for goodness sake, let's be real here. The British press, the English press. No, I'll include Scotland and Wales in this as well. The British and Northern Ireland. The British press loves anything sensational. They really do. The more sensational, the more papers they sell. More papers they sell, the more ads they sell. Okay, fine. Let's chalk it up to business. But you're talking about a person here. And you're talking about two people who were friends, one of whom has passed on and can't defend himself. And I said, and I admire Michael beyond belief for how he treated people. He never showed anything close to ageism, racism, ethnicism, sexism. And he had people surrounding him, good people from all walks of life. The fact that he was putting makeup on with a brush. I put makeup on with a brush when I do television. Actually, I prefer to have somebody else doing it for me because I can't see the spots I might miss. And that, by the way, that picture, as I remember it, it was in Dallas on the Victory Tour. There's another picture that is the night before. Is a picture of Michael and Jamon putting makeup on themselves in front of one mirror. They were both kind of, I want to say they were both sort of contrived images. They were real. They were actually doing it. But I think Michael was being a little bit, oh God, if I say a little campy, I'm going to get accused of something else. So Michael was being a bit over the top, dramatic, in the way he was holding the brush and putting the makeup, dabbing the makeup on. It was for the camera, but he had to put the makeup on, right? Am I making sense? Is it? Yeah. Understood what I'm saying? I would do the same thing. I don't know why anybody. You get in front of a camera, and I don't care how big a star you are. You get in front of a camera and you play to the camera. I have a very, very well-known picture of David Bowie from the making of Labyrinth, singing and dancing. And the film crew failed to get it. And I'm in the studio, and it was an actual take. I'm shooting with a blimp, and a blimp is a sound deadening device. And I walked out into the control room, and I said to the film crew, I said, you guys just missed a moment. And David said, let's take it again, and I'll do it again. And he did it for the film crew. Of course, nobody knew that, at the time, and it was never put out there that it was a second take, but it was. And the fact is, he did it for the camera. Just like lots of artists do things for the camera. Let's ham it up for the cameras. That's what makes the artist desirable. I've seen artists take it to extremes. This was not an extreme. This was just Michael putting on makeup and having fun doing it. And, a picture I captured of him that I considered to be kind of fun private moment of Michael putting makeup on. So the media likes to sensationalize that or whatever. They love to sensationalize things.
There's also an element of just doing it because it's, because David Bowie wore makeup. There's lots of male artists that have worn heavy makeup, Adamant, so on and so forth. But for some reason, whenever Michael Jackson does something, it's presented in a way that it would not be if it was a different artist.
Because I think that neither David Bowie nor Adam Ant nor Alice Cooper spoke with a soft, higher-pitched voice. And I think that there are a lot of idiots out there that can't have that, can't accept that. So they have to make it something that it's not. I have a picture, by the way, of Alice Cooper putting on mascara. And he was really playing to the camera, putting on this mascara. And then he yells out, while he was putting on mascara, he yells out, "Where's my lipstick?" I mean, really, I think, Charlie, you're 100% correct. It's the way the media perceived Michael, and it's the way they wanted to create Michael. A friend of mine once defined the English press as building people up, putting them on a pedestal, and then knocking them off as fast as they put them up there.
Yeah, it's the classic story, the rise and fall.
They did it to David Beckham. Have you ever heard David Beckham speak?
Occasionally, yeah.
Okay. He has a almost childlike voice. Sorry, David. And unlike you, Charlie, I am a huge football fan. And I really liked David Beckham. But, if you listen to him talk, it's not like, he doesn't sound like your typical sort of jock, deep voice. Hey, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to kill. Maybe that's American football, but still, or is it Australian rules also? I think they're pretty big, brutal, macho guys, but you can't define somebody by their voice. Did you ever hear Marlon Brando speak? He didn't have a deep voice, but he was considered to be a sex symbol and I hate to use the word macho again, but a really macho guy.
Well, that's the other strange thing with Michael is that, of course, he was a huge sex symbol. If you look at the crowd, you were on the Bad Tour. Look at the amount of women in the crowd every night. Tens of thousands of women would be screaming and many of them would faint. So it was almost like the media was intent on telling you that Michael Jackson was not a sex symbol, even though he very clearly was.
And by the way, I am convinced that half the girls that got carried over the audience and put on stretchers to, go to the first aid center backstage were doing it so that they could get backstage. One girl actually got up and tried to run on the stage and Chucky caught her and held her and she's kicking and screaming and you're not going anywhere, girl. You just fainted. You ain't going nowhere. You got to stay right where you are. Look at the girls that would come up on stage during She's Out of My Life. Holy cow. Yeah. One girl, do you remember the girl where I forget where we were. She wouldn't let go. She held on, and she had to be pulled apart from Michael.
Yeah.
Tell me Michael Jackson. If anybody tries to tell me that Michael Jackson was not a sex symbol, then I don't know who was a sex symbol in the history of entertainment. Michael had a tremendous following of girls and guys, you know, who were in love with him. And that's what you want when you're a superstar. That's how come he could sell 40 plus million albums. That's how Michael was perceived by the world. And for goodness sake, the Guardian writes a crazy headline like that about using a powder puff. I mean, hey, more power to them. If they can find the sensationalism in something as simple as what I said about Michael loving all people and seeing all people as they are, you know, more power to them. They've got a great headline writer who just takes things out of context and makes it sensational. And they probably happen to find they probably had the sensational headline writer look at the story because that was what was going to sell papers. I'm curious to know if that sold a lot of papers.
Well, it definitely shot the story up to their top, at least like their top 3 most read on the web, because they have a little ranking on their website that tells you what their most read stories are today. And wow. That piece was right at the top of the chart.
Wow.
It was being discussed by all corners of the fan community as well. I've seen it in a lot of different groups on Facebook, but all positive comments, really. Nobody focused on the headline. It was mainly fans positively talking about what you had to say.
I have hundreds of emails and tweets and posts and such, saying thank you so much for putting out positive things about Michael. Yeah. I only will put out positive things about Michael because there's nothing negative to say about Michael. Michael was human. You know, he could make mistakes like everyone else. But Michael was, and I will say this again and again and again to the day I die, Michael was not only the greatest performer of our time, the greatest entertainer of our time, and I make no apologies to anyone else because I love David Bowie, I love Frank Sinatra, I love the Stones, I love The Who, I love Coldplay. You should see my collection of music. I listen to music all day long. And I've even made mixtapes for shoots just so that I would play what, somebody I'm shooting wants to hear. But Michael was the greatest. Michael was the most famous human being that has lived in our lifetime, probably to date in any lifetime. Michael was the most prolific writer, most engaging performer, most visual, great dancer. And if you have to remember Michael because his photographer said, he had a feminine side, or agreed with a writer and said, yes, there was Michael had a feminine side to him. Well, I'd be proud to be that person with a feminine side too. If I were Michael, I'd be proud to be what Michael was. I'd be proud I'm proud of the fact that I had the opportunity to work with someone of such greatness, someone who could go to a children's hospital and brighten their day, brighten their life. And I mean, there are stories, many stories, where Michael met kids who were dying on their last breath. And they stayed alive for 10, 15. Some of them had miraculous recoveries. I'm not calling Michael godlike, and I don't want anybody to turn my words, but, he had this effect. He also had sympathy, compassion, and empathy. And when we were in Dallas, this young kid came to the hotel in the back of an ambulance before the show, and Michael came downstairs to see the kid in the ambulance. And the kid, as I remember it, if I'm not mistaken, and I hope someone can check this, the kid saw the show and passed away right afterwards. He lived to meet Michael and see the show. I'm sure you've heard stories like that before.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, the various stories. There were stories of like children who were murdered, who Michael would see it on the news and would be so affected that he would ring the family and pay for the funerals and all kinds of stuff.
There was a mass shooting in Stockton, California, 1989. We heard about it on the news. Michael saw it. I don't remember if it was on, one of the stations in LA. Decided to go to Stockton the next day to pay a visit to the school to offer his condolences to the kids. Now, I don't remember, and the teachers. I don't remember if he paid for, but I think he had something to do with paying for counseling for these kids. This is 15 years before Columbine? When, America wasn't rife with mass shootings. Michael was in tears. Michael was in tears about the kid that passed away in Dallas in 1984. There was a girl who came to a show, I think on the Triumph tour. She had cancer. She went into remission. She came back to see Michael on the Victory tour, and she told him that she was cancer-free. And I believe she's still alive. She was a Make-A-Wish kid who lived. They got it. And she attributed it to Michael. And his response was tears rolling down his face. Michael didn't think himself a god. He just knew that he had the empathy and the power of positivity to help these kids heal. So he helped them. He was very active with Make-A-Wish for that very reason. We could go into hundreds of stories about Michael wanting kids and even some adults to come to his shows, to meet him. In the end, and I don't want to go down this path at all, but it's what got him in trouble with a very dastardly family, that took advantage of him, that put him through hell. You guys know who I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you were there right in the middle of, because the whole '93 scandal broke in the middle of the tour.
Yep.
So you would have been a percipient witness to the whole thing. So, I mean, what was going on there?
I was in Neverland shooting something, and Jordan Chandler was there. And I have a picture somewhere of Michael patting Jordan's head. Jordan's wearing a baseball cap. In this picture. And the scandal breaks 3 weeks later. And I'm thinking to myself, what a horrible situation. It was devastating for Michael. Michael was already in a lot of physical pain. It was hurtful. And
why was he in physical pain?
From dancing, from falling to his knees, from, look at his moves. How many dancers can fall to their knees without knee pads and not have spinal problems? It just happened. Michael danced. Some days Michael danced 10 to 12 hours a day. With breaks, obviously, but rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. Michael pushed his body in a way that I've never seen any other artist push themselves. Without breaks, without stopping, just going for it. I'm not saying he was superhuman, but he definitely had a quality about him. As a workaholic and as a perfectionist, an absolute perfectionist. I remember one night at Debbie Reynolds Studios in North Hollywood, Michael was in rehearsing with, I think he was in doing a dance rehearsal by himself, I think. He may have been there with his brothers originally, and this is in 84, before the Victory Tour. And Angela Lansbury. Don't know if you guys know who she is. She's an actress.
My ears have just perked up. I have. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you on a phone decorated with Angela Lansbury right now.
He's a big
dude.
fan.
You coax the blues right out of the horn, Mame. Anyway,
yeah.
So Angela Lansbury, even though I liked Murder, She Wrote, but I was never a huge fan. I watched it, but I was never like a huge fan. I worked with her nephew on some film projects, some TV projects, I think. He was an assistant director in Hollywood, and I don't know what happened to him, but nice guy. And I was a fan of hers. I think you read in the article in The Guardian that my uncle was big Broadway photographer who had a lot of influence on me. And he was very good friends with Angela Lansbury because she was always on Broadway. And I think he did actually shoot all the publicity stills for Mame, both the film and the Broadway show. And I'm walking down the hall, going to the restroom, and Angela Lansbury is rehearsing in another studio for a revival of Mame that's going to play in LA. And I'm peering through this little window. I'm on my knees looking through this window because it's a low window and it's the only way you can see in. And someone had told me that she was in there, and she comes over to the window and she waves for me to come in. And she says, "Who are you?" I said, "Oh, I'm here with either Michael or the Jacksons. I don't remember." And I said, "I think I was with Michael. I think I think it was just Michael alone." She says, "Oh, what's your name?" I told her, and she introduces herself in a very proper way. And she says, "Oh, can I come down and see Michael? I haven't seen him in ages." Of course, it doesn't dawn on me. Of course, Angela Lansbury knows Michael Jackson. Who would never think? So I said, "Sure." I took her down the hall and into the studio. Michael's dancing. And he giggles and he goes, "Oh, I'm so sweaty. Hey, how are you?" Like just so gracious. And they talked and whatever. And she stayed while he, for a little bit while he rehearsed, then excused herself and left. On the way out, Michael said to me, "I didn't know that you knew Miss Lansbury." I said, "Well, I don't." I said, I was watching her rehearse, and she's in that studio with a little window. And he said, "Oh, yeah, he knows the studio." He said, "What's she doing?" I said, a revival of Mame here in L.A. "Oh, my goodness, how cool. I got to go see that." It was not – these are superstars, that the average person just perceives as bigger than life. But there was a respect with Michael, and I think there's a respect with a lot of entertainers for each other, where they will, they will admire each other in a very big way. And Michael admired people in a very big way. Half the Lakers used to come down to visit rehearsals on the Victory Tour, and Michael and Magic Johnson became pretty friendly, and Magic was really good friends with Jackie, and he would come down to rehearsal. Nobody, like, "Hey, Magic, how are you?" Michael had tremendous respect for what these guys did and made sure that any of them that wanted to see the show got to. It was just his way. it was his way, and with kids too, and like kids that he at Neverland, he would have boys and girls clubs come up there and spend the day, and they had the run of the place, and he interact with them just like friends. These are the things that people don't necessarily see about Michael, and I wish I could express in such a way that they really understood that he was human. He was Michael Jackson, but he was a good human being.
We got to this point on a bit of a tangent from you talking about Michael being in physical pain from the tour, and then you were about to tell us about how on top of that physical pain, you witnessed other impacts on him from these allegations which arose. Because I think it all broke while you were on the second leg of the Dangerous tour. So what did you observe about Michael's physical and mental health in the wake of that story breaking while he's still on tour and still having to get on stage every night?
Well, at that point, I was actually not touring with Michael, but I was doing special projects with him. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I was sort of I was doing projects away from the performances, which included a lot of portraits and behind the scenes sort of imagery. And I have to remember now, because a lot of it was just like it was the Mandela shoot. It was the costumes shoot that seemed to go on for days and days up at the ranch, where we photographed Michael in almost every one of his costumes. There was, there were other bits and bobs. I wasn't there shooting live, as it were, all every night, and I only did a handful of shows in Europe. When he was back in the States, I was with him pretty frequently, and what I saw around that time was, my perception was that he was devastated by the fact that someone that he had been close to, who he had befriended and whose parents he had befriended, or whose mother he had befriended, could turn on him like this. And I think that put him in tremendous emotional pain as well. Of course, he wound up in treatment when he canceled Dangerous. And that was very painful for him as well, and embarrassing, I think. Some of these things leak out to the media, and he doesn't want it out there. I'm sure he didn't want all of his laundry aired in public. And then again, you had his secretary at the time writing a kiss and tell, despite having, and even I'm very angry about this. Bob Jones wrote the book that he wrote. It's like, we all,
the book, he didn't even know what was in it. When he was questioned at the trial, he didn't even know what the book said.
Yeah, so Stacey Brown just basically did a Vulcan mind meld, got into his brain and zapped it out and put it in a book, right?
I think what he was saying was that Stacey Brown had embellished the material that he'd given him. Yeah.
Yeah. But the fact is, I'm sorry, he shouldn't have given Stacey Brown one iota of material to begin with. Because, who wants to write, except for somebody looking to make a buck? Who's going to write a book that is so diabolical? Who tells stories? Do you hear me going in the media and telling behind the scenes tales of Michael's life?
I was just thinking that before, actually, how what a testament that is to your character. Not only that you don't go and tell those stories, but just thinking about when the news broke around those allegations with Jordan Chandler, a much lesser man would have sold that image of Michael patting Jordan Chandler on the head. Imagine how much that would have been worth at that moment.
That image, by the way, is kept under lock and key so that in case anything happens to me, it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, even today. And I mean that sincerely. There are people who have seen it. I had conversations at the time with some of Michael's people about what we want to do to kill and suppress those images. We did. We suppressed all sorts of, there was a photo shoot that I did of Jordan that Michael paid for. We killed it. It's gone. Doesn't exist. I have a lot of choice words to use for Jordan's mother. I won't. Obviously, his father committed suicide, and I think he just, some people will say that he committed suicide because he had some, I guess he had some kind of debilitating or incurable disease. I don't know what it was. I think he killed himself because he couldn't live with his own guilt anymore. He picked Michael's pocket. Well, not Michael's pocket, but the insurance company's pocket for how many millions?
About 18, I think.
Yeah. Whatever it is, it's a lot of money.
You talk about guilt. I actually really am, I don't know if the shocked's the word, but both Jordan and Gavin, I really hope that one day, as men, they do the right thing, and I doubt they will, but a man's life was destroyed because of what they claimed, and I do hope that at some point in the future they do the right thing and tell the truth.
Well, we know that Jordan spent years telling anybody and everybody that it never happened, and when Michael was on trial in 2005. Jordan fled the country so he wouldn't have to testify. But had he testified, Mesereau had all these witnesses lined up who were going to come to court and say, well, hang on a minute, we've known Jordan for 10 years and he's always told us it didn't happen.
Just like Corey Feldman, who suddenly sees an opportunity with a failing career to start talking about, things that may or may not relate to Michael, but here's a factoid in that, right? Don't you remember Corey Feldman said nothing, Michael never touched him. Michael never did anything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started doing interviews. I don't know that he ever accused Michael.
Yeah, I think he gave some interviews where he said Michael had shown him books of photographs of diseased genitals or something. This was in about 2004.
Diseased genitalia. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a turn on. Oh boy. But I mean, I know Corey pretty well, and I think, Corey wanted to get out there that a good part of Hollywood is molesting and inappropriately relating to other actors. I think that's Harvey Weinstein is on trial, or soon to be on trial, for all sorts of salacious acts. Harvey Weinstein is not exempt from anything just because he made some great movies or good movies. Bill Cosby is going to go to jail at 80-some years old. Bill Cosby was America's father on TV. He was just as much as any of these guys that played, family men. It is a sad testament to Hollywood. Yes, the casting couch exists. Yes, there are people out there that use it on both sides for their own benefit. Okay? Men who prey on women, boys, children, whatever. are just despicable human beings, even if they are artists, even if they are producers, even if they are whatever. Okay? I'm not commenting on, I'm certainly not going to comment on the musician groupie relationship, because I think that's consensual. But for the most part. But I think that these guys that prey on innocence looking for a way to get their foot in the door are just despicable. That was not Michael. Michael didn't need to hurt anybody. He wasn't a hurtful person. He was just the opposite of that. He was, a very kind, loving person. But where has our world gone when the current president can say what he said to Billy Bush? I don't know if you're familiar with that. That was
of course.
Grab him by the flank.
Exactly.
Yeah,
by their cat. Take their cat and swing it around.
Meow sound here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, Billy Bush got fired over that. Did he deserve to? Hell no. All he did was conduct an interview, and maybe he suppressed it because of his own journalistic integrity. I don't know why he got fired. I think it's ridiculous. Michael went through pain. True emotional and physical pain. He didn't sleep. And when he was acquitted in June of 2005, Michael never ever wanted to go back to his beloved ranch, the only place on earth where he could get complete peace and solitude. He didn't want to go back there. Couldn't even leave the childhood home for his children. And it's very sad to me.
I was wandering in the rain, mask of life, feeling insane. Swift and sudden fall from grace. Sunny days seem far away. Crimson and shadow belittling me. Stalin's tomb, I won't let me be. On and on and on it came. Wish the rain would use to let me. How does it feel? How does it feel? How does it feel? How does it feel?
Hi, this is Scott Ross, lead investigator on the Michael Jackson trial, and you are listening to the MJCast. Thank you for listening.
So just on the ranch, you spent a lot of time there, by the sound of it, shooting Michael in the ranch. Can you talk to us about what sort of place it was to be at? What did it feel like to be at Neverland?
I relished every minute that I was asked to come up there. It is one of the most idyllic places on earth. It is peaceful. It is calming. You can get lost there. You know, it's huge, and there was so much there. For example, if I couldn't sleep, there was a whole game room house to go to play in, with pinball machines and a flight simulator and toys. The house itself was like a museum. Michael collected, to anybody else, he'd be he's a very savvy collector of all sorts of cool stuff. And there was all sorts of cool stuff to always look at there. There was a kaleidoscope that I got lost in for about half an hour one time in the living room. If you enjoyed walking or hiking, there was a never-ending array of trails and places to go. The train was was cool. The amusement park area with the bumper cars and the Viking ship and the cups and all that, just incredibly, like, to have that as your own personal outlet for fun. How many people in the world can do that? Michael gave himself and his guests the ability to have unlimited fun. And let's not forget the animals, because he had the most beautiful, wonderful animals in an animal park that was much friendlier to the animals than any zoo. I had a particular affinity for his lion, Kimba, who was just lovely, as lions go. I don't know what else I can say about the ranch. I mean, I wish I could take the pictures in my head and put them there for your viewers to hear or to see. The ranch was one of the most amazing places on earth. And to see Michael lose it in the way he did, and to see him not want to go back there, breaks my heart.
It was very sad. And it sounds like you had a lot of fun there with him as well. Your Guardian interview talks about you being pretty aggressive on the bumper cars with him.
Yeah, we were, and it was right after we viewed What's Love Got to Do with It. I think we both needed an outlet for that. That movie can be very upsetting, and we both know Tina well, and I worked with her just after she and Ike broke up, and when she started building her career back again. I think for Michael, seeing anybody abused is just, was devastating for him to witness, and the movie affected him, and we viewed a bunch of films. I viewed a bunch of films with him at the ranch, but after that one, we went out and we got on the bumper cars and just started slamming into each other, just as an outlet, for emotion. He loved that. He was not one. I came at him one day from one end of the bumper. There's I don't know what you call it. I'm going to call it an arena. And the bumper cars they're electric, and they have a pole, and the post hits electric charge in the ceiling, which drives it. And I started at one end and diagonally came across and slammed into him and knocked him across to the other side of the little arena. Like if you've ever played air hockey, kind of like hitting the puck. It was so fun. And then he came back at me and knocked me to the other side. And we just kept doing this. And a bunch of other people came and joined in. And it was a free-for-all with the bumper cars. Michael loved that. You know, I think I told the story in The Guardian about the Viking ship. I was photographing him from across on one end of the ship. He was on the other. And I said, you know, he kept telling the guy to speed it up and make it go higher. And I said, I forget exactly what he said, but I said something about, you're going to make me lose my cameras. And he says, I might lose my cookies. And Tom Hobbs, the writer for The Guardian, didn't understand that that's an expression meaning I'm going to get sick. I'm going to throw up. Oh. And he took it to mean that Michael must have had cookies in his pocket. They were going to fly out or something. And it wasn't that at all. It's a very American expression. It was hilarious. I mean, I had my camera on a neck harness that went around my shoulders as well. And so it wasn't going to fall off, but he was a complete daredevil when it came to those rides. I wish that I don't know if he ever built the roller coaster. I don't think it was ever finished.
I don't think he was allowed. There's a story out there that he wanted to, but the local council actually stopped him from being able to build it.
Yeah, I think that's true. They gave him a really hard time about the train too. And I remember when they built the train station, I went up there to photograph the property, and he wasn't there, and I was up there photographing these statues. He had animal statues placed on the lawn in front of the train station. I was up there for like 3 days just photographing the statues, in situ and also the train station. And I get a message to call him, and he said, "Don't photograph the train station." I said, "Oh, why?" He said, "Just don't photograph the train station." I said, "Okay." And then he calls me back and he says, "I need to talk to you, but I can't on this line. I don't know who's listening." And apparently he didn't want the train station photographed because he put it up without a permit initially, and was fighting with the county or whatever about it being there. And of course they let it be there. I think, whatever he had to do to make it stay, he made it stay. It was beautiful. It was an absolutely beautiful building. I think it's still there. I'm pretty sure it's still there.
I think everything's still there except like the rides and the contents of the houses. Other than that, I think most things are still there.
Yeah, there's nothing in the house. There's nothing of his that's in the house anymore. The rides are all gone. They've been sent to different places. I've been in the house since Michael passed, and there's nothing.
There's a fascinating photo shoot out there, actually. It was one of the more interesting shoots that I think that took place at Neverland was one that wasn't even allowed to happen. I don't know if you've read the news story, but those couple of guys snuck in there after Michael had left. I think it was 2007 or something. They went in late at night and just photographed this like abandoned Neverland. It's fascinating images to look at. Things are in disarray, and
I think these guys are famous for breaking into abandoned properties.
Yeah,
and doing that. I mean, I've read it. I've seen it online. And I've wanted to get in contact with them. I never have, but I've wanted to get in contact with them. And just, I don't know if they'd even talk to me because what they did was illegal, and who knows if they're, worried about trouble. But I have such fond memories of the place. The kids, I think, are the ones who lost most because, this was their childhood home. And I think that I know from, talking to Paris that I think she'd love to be able to go back there and live there, or at least have it as theirs. But it's, the whole situation is very sad to me.
There's a lot of criticism of the estate, given how rich it is and given how much money it's made since Michael passed away, which is billions, literally billions. A lot of fans are very cheesed off that they haven't bothered to buy it back. Neverland? Is that something you think they should do?
What keeps me out of trouble, Charlie, is not commenting on anything about the estate. As a human, as somebody with compassion for Michael and his kids, yeah, I do. I think that they should have done everything in their power to make it possible for his kids to where they were born and grew up. I think that there's a lot of things that I don't want to comment on. They do things as they see fit, and I'll leave it at that. I think that at some point his heirs should have more control. And, from my point of view, he asked, I'm only going to say this, he asked that his catalog never be sold. I do remember a public speech where he said, over my dead body, the catalog was sold. It was, nothing anybody else could do about it. It was a decision that was made by the people that were put in charge.
He also said, similarly to the catalog comment, he also said in his TV special, Michael Jackson's Private Home Movies, that he would never sell Neverland.
Yes.
I think there's actually, I can't remember, this is just a vague memory, but I think there's an interview out there with somebody who spoke to Michael later in his life about what his plans were for Neverland. And although Michael didn't want to move back there, he did want to open it up to become a retreat for people that were suffering from illness that could go and stay there.
I've heard that. And again, these are not things that I can speak to because I'm just not privy to them. But yeah. I can, as long as we're talking about it, I will say that it is such a beautiful setting that it would be perfect for that. I also think that, letting that many thousands of acres go to waste is just sad. It's a big portion of Central California. I think there's also the problem of, and we can't, I don't want to lay blame on anyone, whether it's the estate or anyone else, except I know that his neighbors gave him a hard time at different times about being there. And there was, I've talked to people in the town of Los Olivos who've said that, they love the fact that Michael was there. They're very proud of the fact that Michael was there. And I've talked to people in town that didn't care for Michael being there. So I think that, it's a double-edged sword. It's who do you believe? Number one, who do you put your reliance on? It was a long time ago that Michael was there too. When was he last there? It was he moved out in.
I know some of the family were there during the trial.
Yes,
but I don't know whether Michael was there. I think he was actually. I think he stayed there in a guest unit.
Yeah, he was there. He was recording music there with. We've spoken to Michael Prince, who said that he was there recording music with Michael during the trial.
So that was 2005.
Yeah.
4. Yeah. But, again, that's 13 years ago. I just think it's sad that it had to, it had to be left the way it was. I think it's even sadder that, and again, I don't know, but I've heard the stories that Tomei stole a lot lot of what was at the property.
Oh, everything was there. It was all auctioned off through Julian's auctions, auctioned all that gear off.
Yep.
Just priceless artifacts of the greatest entertainer who ever lived, from costumes to chairs to cars to everything gone.
It's very sad. It's very, very sad.
Something else that's very sad, and I know that this might be a bit of a subject you have to dance around carefully, but it's something Charlie and I both very much hope we can talk about, is that you were there for probably the single most controversial thing that the estate and Sony Music have ever done in the history of Michael Jackson, posthumously anyway. You were there photographing the sessions that Teddy Riley was involved in for the Michael album in 2010. And I know you'll probably have to be careful around what you say here, but can you talk to us about what that project was like? What was the vibe in the studio as Teddy Riley was working on Monster and those other songs?
Again, there are things that I can't discuss because of legal constraints. I will say that the vibe in the studio was absolutely lovely. You know, it was only after the question mark arose as to what was Michael, what was the Casios. You know, I was very mindful of what I was seeing and hearing. I think that the songs themselves, in some cases, were okay, but you don't claim it to be somebody who it's not. And I have to, again, you're right, I have to dance around this a little bit. To answer your question, the vibe in the studio was awesome. It was a lot of fun. I think that Teddy's heart was really in the project. I think, though, that it's probably something that should have been done with a little more care and probably later on. I don't know what the sales figures were. I've heard that they were not very good.
They really weren't.
Yeah, it was in bargain bins within about 6 weeks or 2 months.
Which doesn't surprise me, considering all the bad publicity it got. The fans are they're very astute, and the fans are not going to sit back and take any nonsense. You know, who's going to buy a posthumous album? It's either fans or people who have heard the songs and fallen in love with the songs. It is what it is, and I just best to skip over this one any further.
No worries.
All right. What if I put it this way? Would you put your life savings on the tracks being real or fake?
The tracks were, they were real tracks. They were music. There was music. You know, you can hear it. It's music. Would I have invested in that album as a project? No.
Okay.
Fascinating. I mean, I appreciate you say you don't want to talk about it, but I've got so many questions about like what Teddy was saying, what he was feeling, what he was, you know, because he worked on a range of different tracks. He worked on ones that were actually Michael, and then he worked on the Casio tracks. And right. I'd love to know if his attitude changed between those two tracks and his.
Why don't you get Teddy on the show?
We've tried. I've actually. Well, the thing is, I've spoken to Teddy. On Twitter, and he's revealed to me publicly on Twitter that he was screwed over by the Casio family.
Okay.
He's actually come out and publicly said that he was taken advantage of from the family, from Sony. So he's been public about it. I'd love to talk to him.
Which family? You mean the Casio family?
The Casio family, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he was there. He was there with Tarrell, Michael's nephew. They were working together in the studio, and they lost a friendship over this situation because of Teddy's choices.
Yeah. Well, and I understand that. I think that anyone who worked on that project, and I came in, okay, so here's the story. I came in because Teddy's manager called me and said Teddy wanted me to come down and shoot. Okay, fine. And I knew Teddy, you know, so that wasn't a big surprise. And then I said, we were talking, and he said, could you bring me some pictures of Michael to put up in the studio as inspiration? And I agreed to. You know, I brought him some pictures. I put them up in the studio as inspiration. This was not that long, I guess. I forget. I worked on a project with Teddy around the same time I was doing a Blackstreet project with him and shooting his band. it wasn't an unusual request. I think that it was only after things got started and I wasn't aware of there being any controversy to begin with. That sort of thing only happens afterwards. And I'm sad that it happened. I'm sad that the decisions that were made were made.
Were you actually there documenting? Is that what you were doing? Were you there taking pictures, or were you kind of there as a guest? Oh, you were there documenting. So is there like documentation then? I don't know whether you were filming or taking pictures or what was going on, but is there like a contemporaneous record of the shit hitting the fan, basically? Was this all captured?
The so-called shit hitting the fan was not something that was noticeable to anyone on set, in the studio. Kind of difficult to describe. It was like it started coming out with conversations behind the scenes. And I documented as I would have done for Michael, every nuance of the recording. I was in there, with all the background people, whatever. I was there with 50 Cent. I shot the strings, the string sessions, shot lots of Teddy, lots of other people, in there. And don't forget, the tracks came to Teddy finished for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
All he had to do was put it together and mix it, and I won't even say he re-recorded much of it. He just
he
put it
remixed
together.
the music. So I've heard the pre-Teddy and the post-Teddy versions, and he did produce a lot of the music underneath the songs he worked on. But I feel sorry for him in some ways, because what was actually going on was that they were stringing him along. Sony was saying to him, they were giving him sort of one track at a time, and they started out giving him the Casio tracks, and Teddy was working on him in the hopes that he'd actually get some real Michael. I think there's a quote somewhere of him saying, when are they going to give me some real Michael? And then eventually they gave him things like Hollywood Tonight, and he started working on real Michael Jackson. Tarrell was there with him in the studio voicing his concerns, and at the beginning, apparently, Teddy was very upset and very vocal about how he thought it wasn't Michael. But at some point, and he was expressing to Sony his concern, but at some point decided mentally within himself to, subdue those concerns for him to be able to continue to work on more Michael, and that's when the falling out happened, I guess.
Yeah, I think that people make decisions based on what's best for their career, and what's best for them personally, which is why I have shied away from discussing any aspect of it. Nobody's asked me not to talk about it. I was there for the better part of the project and witnessed it as it started and as it sort of fell into what you're talking about. I heard the album once before it was released in its entirety. And I think, have you talked to Michael Prince about it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that Michael is the arbiter of what is real and what is not. Michael knew Michael musically better than probably anyone else in this world other than Quincy Jones, up to the point where Quincy and Michael stopped working together.
I just had a question about, I know you were in the studio filming and shooting the actual recording sessions that Teddy was involved in. Did you document any of the outside things that were going on around it, like the listening sessions, the crisis meetings that were going on at Sony? Were you there for any of that sort of stuff, or just more so in the studio?
Not at Sony, just things in the studio.
Yeah.
And in reality, I was actually in the studio when for some of the listening sessions. Yeah. which were there. I wasn't documenting any of those specific meetings. Matter of fact, I'd be hard pressed to even remember who was there at the meetings. I mean, my memory might be jogged at some point, but not at the moment. I think that my impression was that Sony was intent on getting this record out, and they did what they had to do to get the record out. Beyond that, I think there's this is one of the most controversial music projects ever. And of course, when you're dealing with the King of Pop, it's going to be at the top end of the spectrum, no matter what. And I think that's what we got.
Absolutely. And things are really heating up right now in the trial around it. I mean,
what, because of the girls that brought the class action suit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sony have admitted in court at this point. They've actually said in court that they don't think it's Michael on the album.
Have they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is their argument, Harrison. Right? Their argument is, okay, it's probably not him in hindsight, but freedom of speech means that even if it's not him, we should be allowed to say that it is him.
Oh wait, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Alternative facts. Right. I forgot that it's the doctrine of Trump. Alternative facts supersede alternative facts trump reality. There you go. There's the quote of the day. A bunch of malarkey. I like that argument. If I were some junior lawyer just out of law school, I think I'd try to make that argument too. Who the hell do they have representing them that would make an argument like that? That's crazy.
Zio Madaba is advancing that argument.
Oh God, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, he represents the estate, not Sony.
They're working together. What they've done, the lady is her name's Vera. She's suing Sony, then she's suing various elements of the estate, and they're kind of acting in concert together legally. And then she's also suing the Casio contingent, so Eddie Casio, James Port, and their production company. What the judge has phrased it as is basically Sony and the estate have ganged up, and in the judge's words, thrown the other defendants under the bus. So they've come out and said, yeah, oh, all right, the songs probably are fake, but we didn't know they were fake. And even if they are fake, we should be able to say they're real because that's freedom of speech.
Well, okay. So from a legal perspective, I will say one thing. The songs, if the songs are fake, then they could argue, I guess in theory, and I hope I'm not making their argument for them, but they could argue that they are derivative works. Thus, they can say they are written by Michael with the Casios, and that using, what's his name? Mordecai?
Jason Malachi.
Jason Malachi. Right. To sing as Michael Jackson. I can't believe I'm doing this live on the air. I mean, I can't believe I'm doing, not live on the air, but I can't believe I'm doing this on the air. I don't want to get myself into this. I don't want to become involved in this.
I think, to be honest with you, and we at any point you want, we can move on to another topic, but I think, to be perfectly honest, you're going to become involved in it because you've shot and filmed the recording sessions with Teddy.
You'll almost certainly be subpoenaed, I would have thought.
They don't know where I am, but if they want to pay for my flight to LA, I'll be glad to go. I have not been, oddly enough, I was not subpoenaed for this, and I was not asked to testify at the wrongful death suit trial. there I had offered to testify for Mrs. Jackson if she needed me, and I was not asked to do so. But, here, who knows? I have to read a little bit about the trial as it is unfolding. I'm surprised that they even, personally, I'm still shocked that they even gave these girls standing, because I wouldn't have thought that. Well, I mean, I guess as fans, as consumers, this is a consumer advocacy issue. So,
yeah. I mean, the reason it's in court really is because of two reasons. At the bottom of the album cover, on the back cover, it says all tracks performed by Michael Jackson. So they've actually claimed on the album cover that it's really him singing the songs. So that's one reason. And then they on Oprah, they put out an Oprah special with the Cassios and Teddy Riley on it, saying it's him as well. So I mean, there's multiple avenues they've used, including a documentary on YouTube where they've come out and very strongly said it's him singing the songs. And
that's just really foolish on their part. For you don't do something that you could get caught in a lie for doing, and then just keep lying. You stop.
I mean, meanwhile, they had the Jackson family telling them it's not our son, it's not our brother, etc. They had the fans telling them the same thing. They had Michael Jackson collaborators telling them the same thing. Literally everyone who knew what they were talking about was telling them not to do it, and they still did it. All right, Harrison. Well, thank you very much for talking to us there about, from your perspective, what was going on in those the Michael album sessions. What we might do now is just we're going to ask you a question that we always ask special guests when they come on the show, the people that knew and worked with Michael Jackson in a professional capacity. Harrison Funk, how do you think that Michael Jackson should be remembered?
I've said it many times. I think that Michael needs to be remembered as the great entertainer, the great philanthropist, the great humanitarian that he was. He left us a legacy of kindness and compassion and healing. I go back to Heal the World as a signature piece, but that's only one little bit of Michael. Michael was put here on earth as the man who could change humanity for the better, and his candle was snuffed out too early. So I would hope that people will remember him for the great music, for the humanitarian work he's done, for all the children and all the adults who can attribute healing to Michael and to his wonderful music and to his beautiful personality.
Wonderful answer. Thank you so much. And I just really want to thank you as well for being able to come on our show, come on the MJCast. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. You're somebody that worked with Michael for many decades in many different capacities, as a personal friend at Neverland Ranch, as his photographer on tour, in so many ways. So thank you for coming on to share some of your incredible stories.
You're most welcome, and it was great speaking with you guys. Can we do this shameless plug now?
Absolutely. Now you have a great website called Studio Funk. It's harrisonfunk.com, and Michael Jackson fans all around the world are able to access that website and purchase limited edition fantastic prints of the King of Pop. Can you talk to us about some of the prints people can buy?
Not just of Michael, but of many of the artists that I've photographed. And if anybody's interested, please feel free to contact me through the website. My email is studiofunk, STUDIOFUNK, at mac.com or me.com, whichever. And, I'd be happy to speak to write with fans. The prints that we offer are not your average everyday dime store prints that you can buy in a shop, in Soho or on Hollywood Boulevard. They are art prints. They're limited edition art prints. They, I exhibit regularly and in galleries, and so if anyone's interested in that, please do contact me, and one of my staff will get back to you.
And Harrison, just quickly, are you able to tell us anything about the London exhibition that you're planning?
It's going to be a retrospective of my work, not just images of Michael. The gallery, I can tell you, the gallery is in the Archway, so it's sort of up. It's off of Archway Road, and it will be in, but I don't have a scheduled date yet. We're planning.
Where is the Archway?
Sort of north central London.
Oh.
Do you know where Highgate is?
Yeah. Okay.
Up
right.
By Highgate. No, not
okay.
Before Highgate. Not quite up there.
All right.
But
Brilliant.
it's
I'll be there.
Central-ish. It's sort of north central London.
Okay.
And that's as of now. If something changes, I will let you guys know so you can publicize it. And I'll announce the opening. What we might do is actually give, depending on how we do the opening, maybe offer a giveaway of opening tickets to some of your fans. To Jamon. Now that we finally got to have a really long chat, let's pick it up at some point soon and have some brief chats about that and what's going on. I'll keep you posted. And Charlie, you as well.
Yeah. Well, I hopefully I'll be there opening night.
You better be there.
Forcing you to sign squillions of copies of your retrospective book for me.
Dude, if you're not there, I'll be really hurt. I want you there.
Okay.
Jamon, I want you to fly to England to be there.
Sure, if someone's going to pay for me.
Yeah, no kidding.
I have no money.
I hear that. Well, you have a...
Couldn't you put Jamon on staff?
I see a picture of you holding a little kiddo.
Yeah,
is that
that's
yours?
right. Yeah, that's Olivia. She's a year old now, and
oh my God. Well, no wonder you can't afford to fly to London, and you'd have to bring her mom too, wouldn't you?
It'd be amazing. Well, we're gonna wrap this show up. The reason is because my earphones are battery powered and they're basically running out. They keep sending me alerts saying they're not going to last. So. Again, Harrison, thank you very much for coming on the show. If people want to listen to us, we're at themjcast.com. We are on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Google, everywhere, wherever you want to hear us, on YouTube. Search the MJCast for a podcast. Please consider subscribing. You hear news and discussion on Michael Jackson, the Jackson family, and also interviews with people that knew and worked with Michael Jackson, just like Harrison. So thank you very much for tuning in, everybody, and you have a great fortnight ahead. We'll be back with another episode soon. And from me, keep Michaeling. So we're back here again today, having another chat quite a few months later, though. The reason we're getting together today is because the news has just broken that a new documentary is coming out called Leaving Neverland. It's a collaborative effort between Channel 4, HBO, and Dan Reed's Amos Pictures. And this documentary is going to be giving a platform to two individuals who have accused Michael Jackson of sex crimes, including Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck. Fellas, what a devastating development. Let's lead off with you, Harrison. What do you think about this?
Well, I haven't seen the documentary. I think it's pretty disgraceful that both Safechuck and Robson lost in court in their bid to sue the estate and to sue Michael, or Michael through the estate. And despite that, he now wants to try this in the media.
they want to try this in the media. I don't have a clue who this Dan Reed character is. I better not find out that they've used any of my pictures in this documentary. And I got to say, it's pretty disgusting. Both of them had their day in court. Both of them were unsuccessful. What's the point? Why bother? Just to sensationalize this even further, to run a beautiful dead person through the muck. And I hope I said that the right way. I don't want to hear a bunch of guff from fans who don't like the fact that I just said that, but Michael was an absolutely wonderful human being. So I think that he gave both of them opportunities that they should be proud of.
Absolutely.
He was very generous with his time and money to both of them. And, what's the point? Here it is. Michael passed away 9 years ago, almost 10, 9.5, pretty exactly. And, where is this going? What do they gain from it? Neither of them have made any friends over this thing. When I knew Jimmy on the road, I got to tell you, he seemed like a very happy kid getting an opportunity to dance on stage with Michael, being flown all over the world with his parents, I might add, who were there the whole time. It was a wonderful experience for him, I'm sure. He never seemed like he was scared. He was cowed. He was never, he never appeared like a kid that had a problem in the world. Never seemed like a kid who was worried about something going on behind the scenes, and I don't want to hear from a bunch of psychiatrists saying, well, that doesn't always happen. Okay. I think most people can pick up on when a kid is unhappy. And I think most people can pick up on when there's a problem. And I don't think there's a soul that was on the road with us on the bad tour that ever noticed a problem. Wade is another story. I've met Wade. Wade is one of the better dancers out there, or was. But my impression of Wade, I don't know the guy. We were never friendly. We met a couple of times at different things, and you couldn't even press me to tell you where specifically I spoke with him. But again, he was a kid. To be honest with you, the only reason I interacted with Jimmy was because I photographed him on stage, and because I knew his parents, while we were on the road. Matter of fact, Michael threw a birthday party for his mother and me because we share a birthday, or we're a couple days apart. I don't remember if it's the same day or a couple days apart. He threw a birthday party for both of us in Nice in '88. And, his parents seemed like absolutely wonderful people. I don't know what they grew into, and I don't know what even happened with him that all of this started how many years later, and listen, all I can say is it's the same as there's a few other people out there, I'm not going to mention any names, but we all know who they are, who have said Michael never did anything. Michael never treated us badly. Michael never so much as said a bad word to us. And as I remembered, Jimmy Safechuck was one of those people. I think Wade Robson was as well. What's the story? Is this a money grab like all the other money grabs that we've seen? It's very easy to grab money from somebody who's no longer with us. And it's very easy to grab money from someone who is very wealthy.
Yeah, well, that's how this all came to light, is because the documentary has been programmed to show at the Sundance Film Festival. So Wade's allegations came to light because he filed a civil lawsuit. So in answer to Harrison's question, yes, it was a money grab. He filed civil lawsuits against something like 50 different entities that were in some way affiliated with Michael Jackson. And he was accusing all of Michael's employees and businesses of being involved in a conspiracy, which I think his lawyer described as the biggest Hollywood pedophile ring in history or something like that. So the allegation was that all of Michael's organizations were involved in procuring boys for him and then covering up his crimes. And the reason he had to allege that was because he couldn't sue Michael himself because Michael was dead. So he had to find a reason to sue organizations affiliated with Michael after he had died. And then Jimmy Save Chuck sort of piggybacked on Wade's lawsuit. He came forward a little while later and used the same lawyer, and they turned it into a joint lawsuit. Then there was a third person who came forward, which was a girl, but I don't know what's happened to her, and she was never named. It turned out that Wade had been touting a book before he filed his lawsuit. So again, yes, it does look like a money grab. I don't know. I can't say whether he's being paid for his involvement in this film. I've got no idea, but perhaps the film is another way of trying to build up interest in a book.
It also looks to me to be a bit of a vindictive move because straight after Michael Jackson died, for the following years after that, I know Wade was in talks with the estate to be involved in the Cirque du Soleil thing, and that didn't work out. He didn't actually get the job. So a lot of fans are speculating that maybe it's a vindictive move because he didn't get in bed with the estate like he wanted to.
I mean, look at the type of person that would throw their hats in the ring to be on a tour honoring Michael and to be intricately involved in that show. And then turn around when he doesn't get what he wants, which was obviously a place in that production. And now says, oh, Michael molested me. Oh, Michael did this. Oh, Michael did that. Sounds pretty sour grapes. Sounds pretty vindictive to me.
Mm.
Now, if the average person outside of Hollywood, outside of the entertainment business, who's been wronged, I believe, I think this is a pretty good characterization of human nature. Pardon the pun. The average person who has been wronged by someone else and feels a scar does not throw his hat in the ring to be part of a production honoring that person. Does not put himself in that position unless he has ulterior motives. And I wonder, now that you've mentioned, Wade touting the idea of a lawsuit, if Wade had this all concocted long before he started, this is just conjecture. But, Sundance is a fairly good platform to release an independent film. Always has been. That's the point of Sundance as a festival. A lot of successful films have come out of there, and a lot of documentaries have come through there. I don't know who the producers are. I mean, obviously, I know Channel 4 and HBO. I don't know if they put money into the production or not. It's pretty weird. You think back that HBO was the network that premiered Michael's show in Bucharest. HBO, I believe, negotiated. I might be wrong, but I think they negotiated for This Is It when This Is It came out. Showtime got it, didn't they?
I'm not sure, but they were also involved in Michael's mid-90s failed One Night Only show as well. I think they were down to actually televise that. So they have a bit of a history with Michael Jackson, actually.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting that they are, this sounds like money. It sounds like, we have the most famous celebrity that's ever lived being slammed apart by two people who have little credibility in my mind, one of whom the media has characterized as having a very failed career 2 years ago. Don't know what it's like now. And I feel bad if that's the case. Look, I feel bad for any artist whose career is dwindling. At the same time, it's been 30 years since Bad, 31 years, 31 and a half years since Bad started. 31 and a half years, wasn't it? Bad started in 87. I believe that after that much time, to start tearing someone apart, there has to be something, either grave vindictiveness,
Yeah.
or the desire for a lot of money, or both. Now, I think that Wade was not given standing because the statute of limitations had run out. Charlie, please correct my information if I'm wrong, but didn't the court rule that?
So what happened was they brought the case out of time, so they had to make an argument to justify bringing it out of time. And I believe the argument they made was that it was some sort of psychological problem whereby the psychological damage caused by the abuse meant that Wade was unable to realize that he had been abused until the statute of limitations had passed. And therefore, that was their justification for bringing the case out of time. But it failed. So the case was slung out of court before it could even start. It took a couple of years of arguing back and forth between his lawyers and the estate, but eventually they got it tossed.
None of that makes any sense to me at all. This guy was on the stand in 2005. He was the lead defense witness for Tom Mesereau and said on the stand that nothing ever happened. Come on.
Right. So how if he didn't realize that anything had ever happened? I mean, I'm going to tell you, honestly, I've never been molested by anybody except I was bullied. You know, like I think all of us probably were bullied to some degree in high school. I can remember every single kid that ever tried to push me into the mud or threw my books out of my locker, whatever. Okay. There weren't that many, but I can remember every incident. And I'm friends with a couple of them today. And we've laughed about it. I find it very hard to think that he didn't realize that he'd been abused. What did he think what was he thinking that the abuse he's alleging is just the normal behavior of another person? Surely he would have thought about that long before he testified on Michael's behalf.
He was not actually, just to point out as well, he was not just asked on the stand, were you abused? Because that way it might wash if he could say, oh, well, they asked me if I was abused and I didn't consider it abuse. But he actually was specifically asked repeatedly, did Michael Jackson ever touch your genitals? Did Michael Jackson ever fondle you? Did Michael Jackson ever kiss you in an inappropriate way? Etc., etc. So they put to him all of the specific acts on the stand, and he repeatedly denied all of them. So this whole thing about, oh, well, I just didn't realize it was abuse, that doesn't really wash. It's still, abuse or not, he denied the specific acts in 2005. And that throws his whole credibility down the toilet, because even if you believe, let's say you believe him now, for argument's sake, it still makes him a liar and a perjurer. So even if you believe him now, you still can't objectively say that he's a credible witness, which means really you have to sling everything he says out of the window. So the whole idea of basing a film, a documentary on this guy's testimony, when by his own account he's a liar and a perjurer, is just ridiculous.
Charlie and Jamon, honestly, that sheds more credibility on our argument that this is just a money grab. It's a great way. Listen, best way to make some money today in the entertainment world is to make a reality show that is controversial, or to make a documentary that dredges up controversy and harms the people that are involved, other than the protagonists. Or it would be the antagonists in this case. I'm pretty certain, having read a bit about this documentary, and I'm sure you guys are going to ask me if I'm going to watch it, which I haven't decided yet. And I'll tell you why in a second. But from everything I've read, it sounds to me as though the producer was got hold of Safechuck and Robson, and saw dollar signs or pound signs, and said, I can make some money making a documentary. It's not going to probably take that much, but to get some outtakes, some clips from some clip service, and to do interviews with these guys and other people who are so inclined to speak ill of Michael Jackson. And we know there's plenty of people that have been willing to speak ill of Michael Jackson. I'm not going to mention them because I don't want to give them any publicity.
Well, I want to ask, I know there are a range of people, like, let's not beat around the bush, but I want to ask, why is there this pattern whereby former friends of Michael Jackson, namely kids that he was friends with or families that he was friends with, why are they turning on him in the most horrible way? And so many of them, the Chandlers, the Arvizos, the Robsons, Safechuck. Let's talk about, the Casio family. They haven't chosen the molestation route, but they've done pretty much the same thing in another way. Why are all these families that Michael was friends with turning against him massively? It's shocking.
Take them one by one. Evan Chandler, who killed himself, by the way. And, there's a number of different opinions of why he killed himself. Evan Chandler didn't like the fact that Michael turned him down for a multi-million-dollar deal that he put to Michael because he was jealous of Michael's relationship with his son. Okay, that's number one. Number two, look at the Arvizos. Janet Arvizo was convicted of welfare fraud. You're going to defraud the state of California, you could easily defraud Michael Jackson. Janet Arvizo was another one, needed money. They weren't doing so well. What did Michael do for Gavin? Michael paid for medical bills, paid for their support. Come on, let's be real. The Safechucks. I don't know that the Safechucks needed money. I don't know that Jimmy needs money. I have no idea. Maybe he turned on Michael because he felt like his career never, I don't know. This is conjecture again. Maybe he thought my career never went where I wanted it to go. And, Michael should have done more for me to make my career something. I don't know. And I don't want to put words in his mouth because I don't want to be the one to give him fuel for the flames. You look at some of the other kids and families that were around Mike that have basically used whatever they can to parlay their own pocket change, their own careers by their attachment to Michael. There was a fourth person you mentioned.
I mentioned the Casio family.
Oh, the Cassios, right. Okay.
That's different, though. So that's not molestation.
That's a very different situation. But look at the Cassios. The Cassios had a musical and social relationship with Michael. Charlie, please tell me what happened in the end with that court case in
Sony and the estate managed to get the case thrown out by arguing that freedom of speech includes the freedom to describe fake art as real. So the case was thrown out of court, but Vera has managed to get it accepted for an appeal at the Supreme Court. So she's now awaiting a hearing at the Supreme Court.
This could drag on for years and go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. That it takes a while for that to happen. I, as an artist, personally, am appalled by the idea that it's okay that the courts would rule that it's okay to consider fake art real because, they've also said, the courts have also ruled in the case of people that have stolen pictures from Instagram that it's fair use, and that's being appealed to right now. It's troubling to me as an artist that could happen, right? Because there's a fine line between real and fake these days, courtesy of our president and his people, who like to talk about fake news and fake everything, and yet, the man lies every day of his life. Maybe this is what's going on. I don't know. I'm just, my only point about the Cassios is when the truth is borne out, and I believe, hasn't Malachi admitted that he sang some of Michael's parts?
He did. There was a Facebook post from him in 2010 where he came clean, but he claims that he was actually hacked, and that was a fan that got in his account and did that. I've spoken with him as well, and he's held the line all the way since 2010 that he's he doesn't actually come out and say straight up, I'm not the singer. He dances around it, and he'll say, I can't confirm or deny, or he'll say people are lying about him or whatever. He'll never say, I didn't sing the songs. The reason I raised the Cassios is because I think it's pretty clear that the reason Eddie Cassio's done what he's done is because he felt like he was owed something by Michael that never worked out. Like they worked for years on those songs. James Port, the guy he worked with, was an actual, collaborator of Michael in a New York studio during the Invincible sessions. This guy had met Michael Jackson before. They'd worked together before in the studio. Eddie teamed up with him. They worked for years on the songs together. They were crafting them. They were ready to present them to Michael in London during This Is It. They never got to. So I think Eddie did it because psychologically he couldn't handle the fact that his dream songs never got worked on by Michael Jackson in the end. So he wanted to make it a reality in a fraudulent way. So can we take that and apply that to people like Wade Robson? Did he feel like he was owed something by Michael Jackson that never worked out? Did he audition for This Is It and never got to do it? I don't know the story there. But
you'd have to ask Wade Robson, because honestly, no one can speak to his state of mind and his feelings except for him.
The pattern is that they always bring these cases when they get frozen out. Evan brought the allegations when he got frozen out. Gavin's family brought the allegations when they got frozen out. Wade brought the allegations when he didn't get the job for the Cirque du Soleil show. Having previously, since Michael died, repeatedly participated in tribute events. He even wrote a chapter in the official Michael Jackson opus where he says words to the effect of, Michael was the most perfect human being I've ever had the pleasure to know, and everything I do in life, I do with a view to being as much like him as I possibly can, something like that. So he was participating in all these tributes right up to the point where he didn't get that job, and he got frozen out, and then he too brought his claim. So that's the pattern.
Yeah.
None of that's going to be in the documentary.
Yeah, that's not going to be in the documentary, no. I think as far as the documentary, and we were talking about motive, I think you've got to look at this in the context of the Me Too movement. I think Dan Reed and his production company may not just be looking at money. They may be looking at prestige. Ronan Farrow has just won a Pulitzer Prize for his work exposing Harvey Weinstein. So who knows what kind of visions these guys are having about where this could go and what it could do for them.
Well, Dan Reed calls himself the pedo hunter, and he's got documentaries, other documentaries exposing alleged pedophiles. So this is not something new. He's done this before. And I also think, I was just researching last night, who are the executives involved in these companies that are actually making this happen. There's also a woman by the name of Kerry Putnam, who is the executive vice president of HBO, but also has a shared role. She's also the executive director of Sundance. So she's pretty much the CEO of Sundance and a very high-level executive at HBO. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's very involved as well in this documentary coming about.
Bottom line of all this is that it's a bit late in the game to be making this documentary. Then again, you look at what was a movie Mommy Dearest was made how many years after Joan Crawford died? You know, and that took some license as well, from what I heard. Not a lot, but you know, there were some untruths, some exaggerations there. But I can't think of many people that have been ripped apart so many years after they've passed, who also had as much respect as they do. And it's disappointing to me. It's very sad to me that a network the size of HBO and a festival the size of Sundance. Well, of course, Sundance is not going to turn down a well-made documentary as an entrant. They're not going to censor the content of a documentary unless it's completely libelous. And if that were the case, you know, well, by virtue of fact, this should be, we don't know what's contained within because we've not seen it. We don't know how much of this is libelous and how much of this is just sensationalized. Because Michael's not here to defend himself, which is an advantage for the accusers. That makes it even sadder to me.
I think you've just hit the nail on the head, Harrison. I think for fans, the way we're feeling at the moment is a lot of documentaries and books come out about Michael Jackson all the time that say silly things. And I mean, we're no stranger to it. Even when Michael was alive, I remember a UK TV station airing a documentary called Michael Jackson's Face, which was like the most horrible, terrible documentary I've ever seen in my life.
Channel 5. I remember. You know what? I remember it very well. They called me and they said, we need pictures of Michael's face so we can morph them.
Oh my God.
They wanted to morph his face. Yeah.
So we're used to all this sort of thing happening. The difference this time is that, like you said, there's players involved like HBO and Sundance who are incredibly respected, large media corporations, and that is very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. We need to be able to do something about this. What do you think about how the estate have recently released a statement basically saying, in a nutshell, we can't do anything about this because Michael's dead and anyone can say whatever they want on a documentary if they're not using copyrighted material? That's right. As long as until the California defamation of deceased people bill ever is resurrected and passes, they're absolutely correct. There is nothing the estate can do. It's not that they're not wanting to do something. I'm sure they do want to do something. You know, I'm sure this is not going to help them in any way. But the only thing that they can go after is misuse of Michael's name and likeness, misuse of Michael's trademarks or copyrights. That's the problem, because a documentary, by definition, is akin to a journalistic undertaking. And, you know, I have to say that they're absolutely correct. There's not much they can do. I mean, they could probably try to appeal to HBO, but to what end? They're not going to get what they want. Do you normally go to Sundance, Harrison?
Never. I've only been to Sundance once, and that was years ago.
You should go to the Q&A. Seriously, I'm being serious. A lot of fans they're buying tickets. They're going to the Q&A.
Well, that's great. When is it?
It's in like a few weeks, I think.
Okay. I mean, I would love to. I'd love a trip out to Colorado. I think it'd be great. But I don't think I don't see it happening. But you never know. I'd be happy to confront him with this. The thing is that I think all that would do, honestly, is just open up a can of media worm for both of us.
Michael Jackson's longtime photographer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I kind of wonder how that will play. And, you know, it's funny, too. I want to say, and you can, I'll say this for the record, but I hope I say it in a good way, or it's meant in a good way, but I hope it comes out that way. I don't do any of my interviews, never have, for fame or for fortune. I've made a few cheeky plugs over the years, and a few of them, but I don't do it, you know, for any personal gain. I do it because of my love for Michael, and because, you know, I think that this is a man who was much maligned for no reason, and who people often forget got to where he got, became as famous as he became because, like Ali, he was the greatest. He's the king of pop. And for goodness sake, let's give him his due. I still can tell you, I have walked into many, many, many a store that plays music and heard rarely just one, usually 2, 3, 4 Michael Jackson songs in a row. The radio still plays Michael, and every club I ever go to, and probably any bar I've ever been to, when they play Michael, people jump on the dance floor. How many years has it been since Thriller came out? How many years has it been since Bad came out? How many years has it been since Dangerous came out? We're talking about songs that have lasted the test of time. Now, I can't think of many songs aside from, a handful of songs from the 20s, 30s, 40s that have lasted, withstood the test of time. Michael still is the legend of legends in the music business. It's just, it's very unfortunate to me that his name has to be sullied for things that were adjudicated in his favor, where he was actually acquitted of accusations and allegations made against him. This just it breaks my heart that almost 10 years after his death, that we're on the radio talking about something that we should not have to be talking about. And I will do this for the rest of my life. Whatever I have to do to make it known that, my attitude towards Michael was very real, and that it's not just very real, but that I will defend him as a person, as an entertainer, as an artist, for as long as I can speak. And I think that there are a lot of people like myself that feel the same way. I think it's just, it's time to be vocal. It's time to be, it's time to say, look, enough is enough. Just give him his due as an artist and cut the other crap, because, how much money are these guys going to make? What's Dan Reed going to make on this documentary? Enough money to do his next documentary, no doubt. Who's going to buy it? Who's going to watch it? What are the ratings going to be like with all the, with so many people not liking it? But there again, controversy buys ratings. Ratings buy dollars. And so it goes back to my original question of, is it a money grab? You bet your rear end it's a money grab. This is only being done for money. There's no good that's going to come out of this.
Charlie, your final thoughts?
Well, I'm very concerned about this documentary, I have to say, in the Me Too era, with the cult of believe the victim. Anybody who doesn't believe the victim is a victim blamer, they're a paedophile sympathizer, etc. I think that the context in which this documentary is being made is a context which is unique to all of the instances through the years where allegations like this have been made about Michael. The public is a lot more primed to believe in these kind of allegations now. And in fact, there's a culture now where it's almost like you have to believe, because if you don't believe, then you will be attacked for not believing. That's the culture we're living in at the moment, is believe the victim. Anybody who doesn't believe, anybody who says, well, hang on a minute, where's the evidence? Or anybody who says, what about reasonable doubt? They're just smeared immediately as being a victim blamer, a criminal sympathizer. So this is a very frightening time. The burden of proof and the principle of presumption of innocence under grave threat. people are being accused under the Me Too banner and having their jobs taken away, and then no charges are brought, but their career has already been destroyed. And of course, the added burden for Michael is that he's not here to defend himself, as we've said. Legal framework in place to protect him. In terms of a living person who's accused, there is at least defamation law, so you can take legal recourse, whereas with Michael, because he's dead, there is no recourse. You can say whatever you want about a dead person, and they can't do anything. Nobody can do anything on their behalf. So I'm very concerned about this. I honestly believe this is the gravest threat that there has ever been to the legacy of Michael Jackson. This is more serious than when they brought the lawsuit a few years ago, because the context has changed. And I do really worry for Michael's legacy going forward. I think you could easily, depending on the public reaction to this film, I think we could see his music banned from radio stations. I think we could see all of his videos pulled from music channels. I think this could be absolutely devastating and permanent. I'm very concerned about it, and I cannot really think of anything that we can do to fight it or to stop it. I mean, we can send complaint emails, but Dan Reed is not going to pull his film from the Sundance Film Festival because the fans have written him a complaint letter. It's just not going to happen. So I really am stumped as to what we can do, and I'm very disappointed in the lack of response and action from the estate and from the majority of the family. The estate is saying, well, there's nothing we can do, but we know that when the estate wants to do something, it does something. We know that with Vera, it did absolutely everything it could. It brought time-wasting motion after time-wasting motion after time-wasting motion just to stop this thing from coming to a trial. It took years, absolutely years, because the estate just, in such a petty way, just filed one pedantic, whinging, time-wasting motion after another. And yet now you have this existential threat to Michael Jackson's reputation and legacy, and they're saying, well, there's nothing we could do, really. There is plenty of stuff they could be doing. It might be frivolous, it might be thrown out of court in a year's time, but that would be a year that they've delayed this film and have significantly damaged its prospects, but they don't seem to be interested in taking that kind of action. That's very disappointing and concerning to me. I would like to see a more emphatic response from the family as well. Jamon has spoken, 3T have spoken, that's about it. Taj is talking about doing a documentary of his own, but it's too late. This film is coming out in about 3 weeks' time. He's not going to have a film ready in 3 weeks. So whatever he does, he's on the back foot. It'll probably be a year before his film comes out. By the time that happens, Michael could be over. It could be finished. It could all be over. This could be the end. So for me, this is very frightening, and struggling to find any kind of silver lining at the moment.
I think what we need to do is all we can do, which is reaching out to the people in charge, maybe not Dan Reed, but certainly Sundance, certainly HBO, certainly Channel 4. Let's get in contact with these companies through emails to their CEOs, not to some, I don't know, help desk, but to their CEOs, and say, this is not okay. And we present the evidence and we say, this is why it's not okay that you're showing this.
The one thing that can certainly be done, and it may not have to be done by the estate, maybe something that somebody in the family, maybe Taj, maybe his brothers, maybe some of the other family members could affect, is forcing HBO to run a disclaimer saying, that Michael's not here to defend himself. Allegations were brought, and these two gentlemen both took Michael's side in terms of allegations that were brought against Michael and other young people. And, especially in the Arvizo trial, they could be persuaded to run some kind of disclaimer saying that, there is no proof of these allegations, that these people lost in court or weren't heard in court. There are actually things that could be pushed, but the thing is, I don't think that legally there's any way to get to stop the airing of this as a work in itself. I think the estate has made a valid point that unless there's some copyright trademark name and likeness infringement that isn't covered in the laws that apply to documentaries or journalistic endeavors, I think that there's not much that can be done other than to force HBO and Channel 4 and Sundance to display a disclaimer. And I've seen that done. I've seen it done on television in other documentaries. It's an unfortunate thing that, I guess you guys are familiar with the California defamation law or the bill that a lot of people tried to pass after Michael passed away. It has not yet gone through the California State House. I don't know why, but with the number of celebrities that are maligned, it certainly is something that should be passed and should be enacted and enforced. I'm just disappointed that after so many years, someone finds the need to address issues that were adjudicated legally and not in their favor by running a defamatory documentary. Until we see it, I have no idea if anyone is there to defend Michael. I gather from everything I've been reading, no. And I think it's very necessary for that at the very least, for that to be part of this production or part of this broadcast, and certainly at Sundance. It's disappointing to me that 9 years after Michael passed, that people see fit to continue trying to decimate his career and to try to bring disrepute on someone so incredibly talented and so incredibly wonderful as a human being. I only ever saw Michael treat people with dignity and respect. I never saw anything else. And I knew Michael for a very, very, very long time. And I have to say, this is a dark moment in the entertainment industry's history.
The MJCast.
Do you feel like holding a press conference every week and saying, well, this is the rumor du jour? That's not true.
No, because I know eventually the truth will prevail, and I'm about truth,